That's the stuff in the girls that and on fun.
Are you? Looks like they put out their own industry. I love it.
No, I don't want to.
Perfect.
Oh, my God.
Everybody, thanks for coming, you guys. If you guys haven't signed in, please sign over the minutes in the back before you get started, if that's okay.
Yeah, I had the
Please sign in.
phone.
There's two options back there.
It was
Two
not
back
that.
there. So please sign in if you haven't. Thank you.
I went in the first week and said I have this cough that won't go away. Like, yeah, take cough medicine. Delsum seems to work well. Put up with that for a week and went back and I said, no, and they listen to my lungs. They go, oh, yeah, you have fluid in your lungs. Okay. Thank you. Yep. So then they put me on 2 antibiotics and but I got through it. Yeah. I see some familiar faces. Is he gonna keep up or is it gonna get sweaty?
I can't.
Feels good. Right now. It feels good.
Check it.
Yeah, I better kick it. I don't feel anything, but
Yes. You know, turn the air down so it gets some air here.
Right.
I don't feel anything coming out.
I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you.
Can't touch it at home, but I do maybe.
Yeah. It's up. It's very.
So Justin.
What's that?
Appreciate it if you just signed one of the single patch in the back. Sign it already and leave your phone. Thank you.
I don't know.
Said the name back.
Yeah. In case they move. Just as a job. It happens for instance, down here in 65, which I think is both
Okay.
where it's settled in.
Yep, that's what I have.
Just as a, if somebody wants to talk specifically afterward, we won't do one by one in the meeting, but after the main part.
That would still hit our averages from 85 to right now, 13,000.
For sure.
Because that's what I was going to say. Pending final bids and insurance rates and
Everything else.
don't worry, I just got the meeting off that. On the website.
Oh, on this? Yeah, we're solid. We got one. They're not chunky. But it's good. The rest is 66.
We have a bit, yeah, that's like something. We have a bit over that. I'm sorry, yeah.
So we've got, you're good on the service. So that they have to write the reports for wrongs and all this stuff. That's what we're hoping for.
One step down.
Yeah. The top stuff being. Okay, sounds good. He said, I said, this will be, I said, did he send all his stuff, his furniture and everything, something else? So I'm like, what do you need to do? So I can't buy it. I said that. He said, well, maybe we'll have to push back payment.
Tell them that
I said, well, no, you sent it, Todd. There's just a reset on it if you want. You know, I'm not really sure. What's your result?
My city's so bad.
Yeah.
I agree with, I see just like it. Most out of press. You know, my. Yeah, well, just out of phase one. Thing I didn't talk about actually, Jess, is the three of us, and I'm good for that, but I were here tonight. I'm not really about the sewer, but is it okay if I talk about it, or are you gonna talk about the reason we bought it? Good deal. You're just gonna do this thing, change. That's perfect.
You have stuff that you're doing.
You're only gonna be about 5 minutes.
Come 5 minutes. Oh, and that's why it's.
I'm in a hurry.
Yeah, and then I'm assuming that it's probably going, yeah. I'm gonna try to get everything. Individually. Sure.
I can think about anything. No. Particularly.
Hard to get forgetting. I'm just finding it saying, so you're gonna go out and tell them to produce, right? Special considerations for them. Perfect. So it's gonna do like their general presentation. Yeah, there was some.
That's, I got it. Stuff there.
Got some good pictures. Right, north. You find a fish or two?
Yeah.
Try to get the vision.
No, there wasn't.
Picture of yourself.
You hit the trifecta.
Yeah. Well, I think we're close enough to 3 o'clock. Thank you everybody for coming today, and taking the time to come on a beautiful day, to hear what we have going on right now. We're gonna do today is we're gonna do a little presentation of, what we have going on right now, where we're at, where it kind of started, our future plans. The goal is to mostly just kind of give an overview a little bit here and then let you guys ask questions. When we start doing questions, we'd like to have everybody have a chance to ask questions. So before you go around to somebody for a second time, we want everybody to have the first chance. We'll start going back to somebody for second and third questions, but we're not limiting anything. Right now, we just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to say their piece. But first off, like I said, again, thank you. Thanks to the sheriff and the fire department for coming here also for some questions. We appreciate that. And our county commissioner also for being here. Like I said, first, Chris is going to start off with a little presentation of what we have going on. And after we get done with, Chris and Mark doing a present, or their talks, and we'll open it up for questions, okay? So thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
Great, thanks, Jess. All right, so I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview and a history of the project. I'm sure a lot of you have heard it before, but not probably everybody. So it's good just to get through that as quick as we can. Then afterwards, we'll have Mark Fuller, our engineer, go over some of the technical aspects of the project. And then the reason that you guys are all here too, the Lavinia Road folks, is there's going to be some special considerations for the construction process proper, because you guys are a dead end road of a longer nature, mile plus whatever it is. So Mark will have some things to say about that too. But again, just a quick overview here first to get us to that point. I did want to spend a brief second just to point out that over the past couple of years, we've come across this website called Niche, which is a community aggregate data website, and they rank cities and whatnot around the country, really. But we found this one first last year, 2023. They ranked Northern Township in the top, whatever it was, 25 places, city suburbs to live in Minnesota. And when you look at the other names that are on there, a lot of them are suburbs down in the city. So it's pretty cool to see a township, let alone northern us, on that same list. Then just this past year here, now this is the 2024 stuff that they have up on their website. We actually just saw that we are ranked #1 as the best place to buy a house in Minnesota. So just throwing that out there because Northern Township is a desirable place to live. We like living here. We wouldn't be living here if we didn't, obviously. And the reason we're doing a project such as this is, of course, to protect a lake. It's going to offer some benefits, which will go over to the residents that are getting the services themselves, but it's actually offering benefits to the community at large too. And we want to see things like this continue going forward into the future, that this remains a desirable place to live. And we aren't a small township by any means. This is some old data. It's the only one that had a picture like this that I could find. I think we're actually sitting at about 3,800 because we have lost some residents to annexation in the past 15 years, but those numbers are growing. We're always seeing more building in the township. We're going to be over 5,000 someday. But just to get a sense of how we sit in the area here regionally, we're pretty populous when it comes to township standards. So to do a project of this nature really is completely reasonable and something that happens all the time. So some more on the background. As we have gone through this process over the past couple of years leading to where we are today, we found out that this has been something that's been discussed in the area 50 plus years. We've had some people at our meetings say back in the 1960s, they were on the board and they remember talking about this. So it's been in the discussion for a long time. They've over the years come close sometimes, but never gotten to the point that we're at now. This really is a very big opportunity that we're trying to capitalize on. And then also the reason why we're talking about this wastewater system right now and today is because there had been some bigger systems that had some issues. Everybody's probably aware of the DNR and the state park are also two entities that have end of life systems. So we, timing wise, just for those bigger system sakes is really good to find a solution such as this, because it'll effectively serve those bigger systems better than the smaller systems that they would potentially put in as a private entity. And then also the County Road 20 project, I'm sure everybody's aware of this too. A couple of years ago, this kind of came to everybody's attention that they were looking to redo the road. And if we did our project in conjunction with theirs, we're estimating it would save everybody over $1 million. So it really is an effective use of taxpayer money to try to find a way to do these two things together. And the county has been great partners through this whole process and really has been waiting, I guess you could say, because they've had the opportunity to move on this before, specifically for our project. They want to see them happen at the same time to take that benefit for taxpayer monies into account. Let me see. There we go. Then another quick thing to point out here is just the general age of septic systems around the lake. This comes from 2020 data with the Joint Planning Board. I'm sure there's a few minor changes in there, but the general sense, over half of the septic systems on this end of the lake are over 25 years old, even according to this map. So there's several private systems that are old and will need to do something in the near future. Again, just another opportunity to connect to a system now that would serve a great need, including to the bigger systems that we had already talked about. There is just this general need. So some of the initial planning efforts We mentioned how Rutgers kind of started a lot of the conversation, County Road 20 project. We had started talking to Bemidji, the city, about opportunities for connecting to their system. We had heard from them that they were really only entertaining that as an option if they were able to annex whatever properties wanted to connect to the system. So we came to our residents, which I'm sure some of you are aware of too. I think that was in the fall of 2021. And we asked the residents how they felt about it. And it was overwhelming that nobody wanted any annexation. Nobody was against the wastewater project. They just didn't want it at the expense of annexation. So we continued talking to the city, and we actually got to a point for a while where it sounded like we were going to have an agreement that we could connect to their system as a paying customer. In the meantime, then we went out and looked for grants because the condition was that we had to put the pipes in the ground ourselves. So we had tons of support from everybody. It's been true the entire time that we've been working on this, from the county Friends of Lake Bemidji, Mississippi Headwaters Board, and on and on. And we were able to, in fact, to secure multiple federal grants over the course of 2 years, totaling $6 million. And then it was at that point, once we had the money, that we went back to Bemidji and asked them what the details of this agreement are going to be. And after further discussion, they ended up rescinding their offer. So here we were at a point where we had $6 million in funding, which again, we've talked about this 50-year plan that people wanted to somehow get this wastewater system into the ground and never were able to. All of a sudden we had this money and it seemed like better than ever. We had the chance, the opportunity to do so. But then we didn't know what was going to happen because we had this agreement fall through. So we started looking at alternative design options. One of them was an open air pond system, and it sounded promising at first, but the big trick with that is that it required a lot of land. I think we were looking at about 80 acres worth of land at the time. And there was one option, but it wasn't going to happen. It was with some school trust DNR land. We had several meetings about it all the way up to the DNR headquarters in St. Paul. It just wasn't going to happen. So the pond system just fell through because that was really the only option we had for a location for it. Then we started looking at mechanical plants as a second option. And at first it wasn't a higher option for us because we thought it had a much higher cost just to get the thing out there and then the ongoing costs. But after we started looking into it, because it looked like one of our only options, we were actually pleasantly surprised about how the numbers were coming in. So it was much more feasible than we had first imagined. And so that brings us actually to where we are today. We have up on the screen here just a general map of what the project area would look like. It's going to start over on the northwest side of Lake Bemidji at the boat landing, wrapping around to the southern border of the township on the east side of Lake Bemidji. And we're thinking of this as in 2 phases for a project basically now. Again, starting at the boat landing on the northwest side for phase 1, going over to the boat landing in the Lavinia area on the east side of Lake Bemidji. And then if you can make it out there, there's the purple box. Sorry, so what I just described is the green box. That's phase 1. The purple box is where the location of the mechanical plant is most likely going to go. And I mentioned the pond system that takes up a large area of land and it wasn't really practical. The beauty with the mechanical system is it takes up a much smaller footprint. The county has a couple parcels of land over there that they have been very gracious to us and are, we don't have it locked down yet, but it sounds like they're more than willing to sell it to us, and we're doing soil analysis on it and everything already too. So we have the perfect spot potentially to put the plant, and it'll connect right into phase 1, like I said, is the green area there. Then the blue area is going to be a potential phase 2, and that's going to go from that boat landing on the east side down to the southern edge of the township. One thing that has been a big silver lining for me throughout this process is back when we were talking about connecting the city, it was just the north end of the lake, probably up to the state park, and that's about it. But now that we had to move the mechanical plant over to the east side of the lake, it really just became practical to look at the entire thing. And breaking it into 2 phases here, again, seems entirely feasible, at which point now we're talking about protecting 100% of the northern township shoreland of Lake Bemidji, and which comes out to about 41% of the entire lake. When you take into consideration the part that's already sewered in Bemidji too, we've almost effectively sewered the entire lake at this point. So regionally speaking, like this is a huge deal. This is something that we really, really want to see happen for more reason than one. Some timelines. So we're hoping that we will secure that land that I was just talking about with the county by the end of the year. We also are working on our environmental assessment. That's a big piece with the grants that we have in place and also just with the MPCA, some other things. So hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have that all wrapped up. And then that would potentially get us into 2025 summer, probably when we'd be looking at actually bidding the project with some of the construction likely happening in the fall of 2025. most likely that's gonna be something like the mechanical plant itself. 2026 is most likely when the pipes themselves would actually be going into the ground. So I've been mentioning the County Road 20 project. That's what we're kind of tentatively shooting for running both of those projects together. Summer 2026, putting the pipes in the ground. Then phase 2, which again was the southern part of the township on Lavinia and Wallville Road. That would most likely, would be pending more funding, which I'll talk about more to be 2027. So another year after all that. And then we do have Sheriff Riggs and Deputy Chief Yavaro here today, because we have had a few meetings with them in particular as well, talking about your guys' road. It is, I always mentioned, it's a dead end road of a long nature. So there's gonna be some interesting considerations when it comes to construction time. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew, we have already been working with emergency services and how that's gonna work during this whole process. And then I'm gonna pass it over to Mark here in a minute, and he's gonna go over some more details. Plus we have the sheriff and Deputy Chief Yabara here to answer any questions that you guys have about emergency services and construction. That likely, subject to change, of course, would be fall of 2026 when we're talking about construction for your road in particular. Another, I'm sure, big question everybody has in mind is some of the finance related things. We did just recently get back some financial analysis. We've been working with a group called Ellers. And so far, our estimates put the project total, that's the entire project, phase 1 and phase 2, at about $19 million, with phase 1 itself being about 13 million. So then I mentioned we have that 6 million in grants already. That leaves about 7 million to get up to the 13, where we would need to bond for that with the township's taxing power authority to back that. One thing that we've been trying to do is think of using the grant money mainly to pay for the mechanical plant and some other stuff. And that is going to be something that potentially could service more of the township too. So we're treating that as like it's a benefit to the entire township. So then when it comes time to talk about assessing the rest of the system, now we're talking more just about the pipes in the ground that are actually servicing the houses that we're talking about assessing. And so then that's going to leave that about 60% of the project costs, where we're calling the collection system. So that's what I'm going to just kind of go over a high level overview of what that picture could look like. The big takeaway for me, and hopefully that you'll agree with, is that when we worked with this Ellers group, they really walked through a bunch of different models for us just to show how this could work. There's a few things that we have to keep in mind. One is that we looked at these bonds, interest rates, and those of course could change by this, say, the summer of next year when we would actually be taking up those bonds. So that's why this is tentative, one reason. And then the other one is we don't really know the final project cost, of course, until you bid it and award a bid. At that point, we have our best guess estimates, which are, really good. The engineers, Mark Fuller, has been doing this for years and years, and they have a pretty good system down for coming up with estimates. So we don't expect dramatic changes, but just to throw out the caveat that these are preliminary numbers and subject to change. And I'm going to make sure I don't miss any of these notes. So let me double check that I've done good so far. So we got assessing 60% of the project. That's a collection system. We are going to include about $60,000 from the general township fund into this. And just to briefly explain our thinking on that one was the residents, especially along County Road 20, they're obviously paying taxes like the rest of us. And their taxes have been going to pay for road improvements throughout the township, like everybody's does. But they live on a county road, so they don't actually get that same kind of benefit back to them as far as road projects go. So we saw this as an opportunity to give some of that road benefit back to them in the form of something that's kind of equivalent to what we're giving everybody else. And so again, we're figuring that's going to be about $60,000 over the next 20 years.
Per year.
Per year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then when it comes to assessments for individual property owners, here's that kind of high level overview again. We've had targets in mind that we've been working towards this whole time, and the financial analysis came back with us being able to hit those targets. So we were really happy to see that. We had $165 in mind for what we'll call equivalent benefited front footage. And I'll quickly try to explain that. I'm sure it sounded like a weird mouthful. But basically, we're just trying to come up with a way so that everybody's properties are being assessed fairly. And maybe if you just think about in your head the shape of a lot being normally a square. But what we want to avoid is somebody who on the road side of the property, if they had a really narrow property for whatever reason, and then back on the lake it was much wider, that they wouldn't get a very tiny assessment because we're just doing the road side, right? So if they had 100 feet up on the road and then 150 feet back in the lakeside, doing it this way as an equivalent benefited front footage, you just basically average the two, and so to come out 125. We do that for everybody's lots, so everybody's getting this averaging effect. And again, just trying to make it fair for everybody. So that target I said was $165 per that EBF. We've also figured that an average lot size in this area is about 85 feet. So that puts an assessment average for the individual property owners at around $14,000. We've also been talking about connection fees and how this may or may not fit into the project. So far, we're kind of toying with a $2,000 connection fee. So that would, at the scenario I just described to you, put the individual resident potentially at about a $16,000 cost when we're talking about assessments. Now, there's a few things that I do want to point out here as well. And again, these are all subject to change just depending on how some of the final numbers come up. But one is that the board has been pretty vocal that they would like to see an option so that residents have the ability to connect either right away if they want, or up to 5 years down the road. And then the other thing was too, that I'll show you another slide here in just a second as well. One of the challenges is that when the system is first getting started, you need to cash flow things so it stays running, and you don't have everybody connect at once. So we want to try to find ways to incentivize people to connect earlier rather than later, so we don't just go into a big deficit right off the bat. And so one of the things we've been toying around is that we would potentially waive the connection fee for the first year. And again, that is largely in part just to encourage people to try to connect right away so we can keep the thing cash flow positive right at the outset. And then the last thing that I wanted to make sure that I touched on here too is the monthly fee. Potentially, we're looking at around about $55 to $60-ish as a monthly rate. And then in working with this elders group and other people who have expertise in this area too, all of these numbers really are pretty similar to what we're seeing in our region in northern Minnesota as well. So I mentioned this cash flow chart just so you can visually see what I'm talking about again too. And you'll notice in the left side there, it shows 2026, and the right side, it shows all the way up to 2034. Again, one of the challenges is just getting enough cash flowing into the whole project here at the beginning. So you don't just go into a huge deficit, because once you have everybody hooked up to it, it's no problem at all. But so this is just one of several models that we ran that we show that we can, in fact, the project's feasible, it is cash flow positive, and there's multiple ways to get there. So then phase two is not part of all this discussion that I just talked through with the financing. So one of the big takeaways for phase two is that we do need to secure more funding. We do have lots of great partners down at the state that we have been very close to getting funding in the past few years, but they have not passed bonding bills. So we're hurting from that. Everybody around the state is hurting from that, but we do expect that when they pass a bonding bill, hopefully in the next year or two, that we'll be in it, because we've had great success with people adding us to the bills in the past 2 years. So we are very hopeful that we'll be able to come up with the funding that we need to do phase two. And we are looking at other sources too. Really, the last thing that I wanted to cover real quick is just some of the benefits. And I have a visual I can show you so you guys can hopefully get a better sense of how this is going to work as well. But I think one of the first and foremost benefits for people is just that you're going to see a lot more flexibility once the system is in for what you can do with your land. Right now, obviously, you have to have a spot for your septic system, your drain fields. After the system's in, you can take those out. So that's land that you can use right off the bat. One of the other things is the way that the zoning is set up. There's setback requirements that are specific to sewer lots versus unsewered lots. Once the system's in, that's going to change, and you'll notice it's dramatically for the better. The one that I point off right off the bat is the setback requirements from the lake to any structure. In the Mississippi headwaters, which Lake Bemidji is, it's 100 feet. Once it's sewered, though, that drops all the way down to 50 feet. So that is a dramatic difference for people and the amount of land that you can use and build with. Other couple just quick points would be the cost savings, just eliminating the future costs of putting in systems. These personal private systems don't have as long of a life, of course, as a municipal system would. The environmental protection is a huge one. It's one of the biggest driving factors for why we're doing this. Enhanced property values just from having a municipal system. There's lots of studies that show that is the case. I've also found some studies from Minnesota specifically where they talked about how the cleaner your water is, the higher your property values go up. Those things correlate. And putting in a system like this, of course, we would hope that we would see some of those things as well. And then just also keeping in mind that this, of course, is going to benefit the residents who are hooked up to it, but it's really benefiting the whole community as well. We do hope that someday we'll have more businesses in our business corridor and have the ability for them to hook up to a municipal system someday really could help drive some of that into our area. It's nothing that's, just in the immediate future, we're putting pipes all the way over here, but we could, down the road. This is a system that that is going to be designed to be able to handle a lot more of the township to be able to connect to it. So the map I just mentioned, we'll just kind of look at real quick. The one on the left shows what the current setback would be like for just a typical lakeside Bemidji property. And you notice that 100-foot setback, and then the dashed line in the middle is kind of the area where you, per our ordinance, can build. And we see this all the time. There's not even room for a garage in something like this. So if somebody wants to build a garage, you're already talking about doing a variance. Then you have the red stuff there showing the septic, the line. In this particular instance, which it does happen on our lake, they don't even have room for a drain field. So they're purchasing lots across the road, running lines under the road. After you would put in this municipal system, those septics come out. The setback goes from 100 to 50 feet. All of a sudden now you can do that exact same design and fit it completely within setback requirements. No variances needed whatsoever. Another few things that are worth pointing out is you also would have the potential for more bedrooms. Of course, septic systems on a private scale limits the number of bedrooms you can have for the capacity. On a municipal system, that pretty much goes away. You'd be probably running into setback and just size of the house constraints before you'd run into bedroom constraints. And then, just improved marketability, the ability to sell these properties when you have much more flexibility in land use in the system. All those things kind of add up together as several benefits for the property owners. We're in particular connecting to this. So then just to wrap everything up, and then again, I'll hand it over to Mark here in just a second. We really are hoping that this project makes it all the way to the finish line because we'll be protecting Lake Bemidji, the entire Mississippi watershed. It's been a 50-year plus regional planning goal. We'd love to be able to see the residents be able to use their properties better, more effectively, have more room to use. And then the Rutgers DNR State Park, those are big systems that they need a solution. We'd really love to be able to help them with this system. And then we have touched on this before too, and it's worth mentioning that if we wanted to incorporate into a city, this is one of the big steps, I think, along that way. This is just another one of the types of services that cities offer to their residents. And the more of those things that we can offer, if we did get our case before our judge, it's just going to be one more thing they'll check off. We're like, yep, you're operating as a city already. Let's go ahead and make this incorporation thing a reality. So with that, that's all I had for the overview. I'll pass it over to Mark and he'll go over some of the technical details from here. And then we will let you guys ask us a ton of questions and share.
Perfect. So as Chris said, Mark Fuller with Freeburg and Ground Engineering, we're the civil engineer for the project. And I see a ton of faces that I recognize from some of the past meetings here, which is really good to see. Chris did a great job of explaining how we got to where we are. Generally, I want to start with talking about this overall project and what we're doing. We're doing a gravity sewer collection system that would be just like you'd have in another municipality like City of Bemidji, for instance. There would be very, very few instances where it would be anything but a gravity connection. So that is no grinder station necessary on most instances. Going to a gravity sewer main out in the street that would be generally down the center of the street and working from there through various lift stations to get to that treatment site that Chris alluded to on the east side. This project has lived quite a life already, evolving as it went, as Chris mentioned, from different variations that started with a city component to now the township only, as well as the variation in how we were looking at treating this waste. So this waste is now looking at being treated over on the east side on a county parcel, being dispersed once treated, meeting drinking water standards underground. Which is a very interesting point and was pretty critical to some of the folks over by that parcel, actually, the folks that live immediately adjacent to it, one of which is an employee of mine, interestingly, and Chris actually lives right adjacent to it as well. The reason, as Chris mentioned, that we have you folks here, and I'm really great turnout here. It's just phenomenal to see this turnout because we'd rather have people come in and have the questions and have an opportunity to talk. But the reason we're looking with you folks first, actually, is we've got a 1 mile chunk there from the time you leave Beach Lane to the end. That's dead end. And we sat down right away, Mark Borseth, Chris, and myself, and looked at this and said, there's complexities throughout this entire project, but Lavinia corridor is going to be one of the most complex because of the length. There are other corridors like Birchmont Court that are also dead end, but much, much shorter. And so we don't have some of those same concerns. So the very first thing that we talked about was trying to get you folks in here in order to talk with you, talk to what our plan is, what the disturbance will be, which I'll get to here, and then get any input that you guys might have. One of the things we talked about when we talked with the sheriff and with the fire department was acknowledging that although we can have considerations on our end, it's likely that you folks who are out there living it may have different considerations or concerns than we would even think of. So we needed to get you here. It is not a meeting per se to talk about the feasibility of the project or anything. It's more so a meeting to give you answers to questions generally and specifically about the project, but also get your feedback on how we are going to interact. We, the township, the engineering firm, us, and eventually the contractor, in order to get this project constructed while still allowing you to use your property to the greatest extent possible during that construction timeline. So hopefully that makes sense. As long as I don't forget, one thing you guys will see from the township is actually a survey that will go out to you eventually here. That survey will cover a number of key items. We're gonna try to get a determination from you as best we can for who is seasonal and who is full-time. Who comes in opening a fishing Mother's Day and who leaves right before school. We're gonna try to get a feel for those timelines, trying to get an idea for what we're gonna be dealing with for traffic from you residents who own those properties, as well as the opportunity that we have to maybe schedule construction around those times to the greatest extent possible. Certainly, we all know that we're in northern Minnesota, so we can't schedule it in the winter, but if we can be earlier in the year and later in the year when we're on an extreme segment like this is, that will be important. Generally, for this whole 1 mile segment, our intention would be rather than running our sanitary main directly down the center line, which is where we normally run a sanitary main. So when you see manholes in the street, that's where that sanitary main is. And usually water is off to one side or the other. We don't have water on this project, though we would have liked to. So instead of having this sanitary main on the center on Lavinia, because of the narrow corridor, it's likely we're going to shift it to one side, keep that construction activity to generally one side of the road as much as possible, and provide a bypass lane in order to get in and out on that other side. But as you guys know, because you live it every day, or at least most days of the year, it is such a narrow corridor that even that will be complex. We have trees, we have buildings, we have garages, we have fences, we have all of those items, some of which are very close or to being within the right of way even. So we want to be really cognizant of that. And again, moving that sanitary main to a non-standard location, which has no negative impact to the cost of the project. It's just not standard if you're ever going to do water. So shifting that again to one side, trying to limit that, and then phasing what portions of that roadway can be under construction at any time. Very likely that we would phase that into 4 or 5 segments to try to limit that whole area where you don't have 2 lanes of traffic. Very concerned, and we spent an hour and a half talking with these folks over here because they live it every day as well, and they know that they've got a mile to get to you if something goes wrong in either a fire or some other medical type emergency. So we're trying to get through to that. I'd like to open it up to questions. I'm jumping the gun a little bit on here, but I'd like to open it to questions generally about the sewer first, if we could, because I think we want to try to handle that sewer and then get to some of those access items, ingress, egress, while we're under construction. Having said that, if you guys want to ask questions about anything, go for it. But I think, I'd recognize maybe a third of the folks in here from past meetings. So I think it's likely that many of you are relatively knowledgeable about generally what's going on, but I'd like to get those questions answered by myself or any of the rest of the board members or the administrator as well. So feel free. I think it'd be good to introduce yourself if you could, and where you're at on the project, just generally there.
I'll start too saying I appreciate we've thrown a lot of stuff at you guys in the last half hour, a lot of brand new information. So we understand there's going to be some time to digest a little bit, but like I said, if some of you have some initial questions, we'd love to open it up. Yes, sir.
I'm Lou Crenshaw. I live on Lavinia Road. If your property slope doesn't allow a gravity feed, what else is involved?
So there's a couple of distinctions there, and we actually talked to Jim Naylor at one of the prior meetings. His is both a slope issue and a distance. He's some 450 feet off, plus he's well below the road. We will design the main out in the street as low as practical, as deep as practical, in order to try to get to you. Jim had an interesting one. I don't know who knows Jim, but some of you likely do. Jim had an interesting one where he is considering the potential of leaving his septic tank in place in case there were ever to be a failure with a pump in his instance, so that he didn't have a backup or something that was gonna fail and leak at that point. It is likely that if we cannot serve you with a gravity service because of either distance or slope or some combination of two, that a pump may be necessary to lift it to the system. It would be optimal if we can get away from those altogether. Undoubtedly, there will be a few options or instances where that will be needed. So to that point as well, if you sit at your residence and look out, a generality of the depth below the street is 8.5 to 15 feet for that sanitary main. So just as a generality, and then, and it's not real meaningful here, but that sanitary slope that you have to have coming from the house out to the main is 1.5 to 2.5% of slope. So you're eating up a lot of grade there, for sure. Many that we see, and this will be on the survey, is do you have a basement or not? Do you know where the service comes out of the house? We find in our other communities, we do those surveys, that about 50% of the people know that information and 50% don't. As Chris alluded to, some of these, or numerous of these septic systems have been in existence for well over 25 years. So you may never have seen them. You may never have interacted with them, and that's fine. So when we do send out that survey, don't feel obligated to go digging in your basement or anything. It's just the better information we can have, and on something like your place there would be great. Along with that, if you have a specific one, when you send that survey back, we would love the opportunity to send our surveyor out to your house and actually meet with you and take some elevation shots. Currently, the corridor that we have surveyed is only about 120 feet wide, and you may have seen Brett out there. I know Brett from Freeburg Grund interacted with a lot of folks, especially on the north end of Lavinia, and had a lot of good questions, a lot of good information. As he noted as well, you guys live it and have some good information there. So I think on that survey, that'd be good if you have an odd situation, or if you have an immediate concern, maybe you have a basement, for instance, and you know you're sitting 10 people over the road plus 8 feet of basement. We would love to talk to you in person on your parcel. Either me or our surveyor or both. Great question.
Did I understand you, right, when you said that you would be digging anywhere from 8 to 15 feet deep
Correct,
to lay the pipe?
correct, to lay the main out in the road.
Linear.
Yep,
You can hit water at 6 to 8 feet.
yes, yep, we've got, and even on the north end of the road, we've got it at 3 foot 10 inches in some places from our soil borings.
There been any kind of a environmental study in reference to that?
That's part of our thing that Chris mentioned, is since we have federal funds, a great question. Because we have $6 million in federal funds, actually they're EPA funds, we have to go through full federal environmental, and that's part of it. During our construction, we have to do actual dewatering to bring down and depress that water table prior to that construction taking place. And then that'll reset once we're done with construction. So we'll be well below standard water table into a dewatered zone that will again have a depressed, just as it did on the west side of the lake some years ago. So you don't generally with this PVC, that doesn't seem to be an issue. This PVC has 60 to 100-year life, and we don't see cracking of lines. Service lines, depending on who the plumber is, the materials used, we have seen that with service lines, but that's a private responsibility beyond. When you're in the right of way, it's a responsibility of the contractor that constructs this project, and we don't have that issue.
Yes, please.
Okay, my concern about this is being able to afford it. I'm retired. I live by myself, so there's only one person, one income. These you're talking about is like half of what I paid for my home. I wanted, then where you say, well, we'll have this much for, a monthly fee. Well, if you have 5 people living in the house pooping, they should pay more than a person with only one person in the house pooping. I think it's a great idea, but I am very, very concerned about being able to afford it.
Well, one thing I can say, and we can talk, that when we talk with the assessment numbers, we are planning on putting an option out there, probably right now tentatively a 15-year option to repay that. If there's a $14,000 assessment, for example, that would be on a 15-year repayment plan. So it wouldn't be something a person has to come up with right away. we put that out there. That's part of the financing, part of the options. And we're open, I think, with these things. We've had if there's financial hardships, we are willing to work with residents to talk to them if there's something that is going on, if we needed to go differently. I think we want to take care of our residents. We don't want to have somebody have to leave their house because of something like this. So we would hope that if there was anything of those situations, we would have a chance to visit with you to see what that would entail, what we could do to make it work.
Hey, just Laura
Sure.
Block on Lavinia Road. What's your grandfather plan? So you talk a lot and it sounds like more of a go forward plan. For those of us that have recently built their house that have a compliant sewer system, we can't move our house back. We're not getting more bedrooms. There'd be a significant cost above all this just to take out what we have that should last us for 50 years. So what's the grandfather plan for people who have a certified compliance system?
I can answer this. Somebody else wants to, talk?
Go for it.
So the plan right now that we've talked initially was like to give a 5-year grace period for people after the plant is complete. Try to incentivize people to hook up, but if somebody has a system that is compliant, and it's when, I think we had talked about within a certain number of years, that we'd give some grace period of 5 years, say, I think was our examples out, right?
Generally.
I think that's what we've talked about, correct? So we're trying to work with that. Again, this is where we're talking right now. This is part of the reason we have these meetings. That's our goal. We do want to see people connect sooner than later. That's part of the reason that we've been so successful in connecting or getting these grant dollars, just because people up and down the Mississippi from the cities are helping sponsor these bills because they see the effect of what Lake Bemidji has. So they really want to see us get the lake sewer because they know this is the first lake on the Mississippi. Or the first state of the Mississippi. So they see that this is a really highly dense area. So that's part of the reason why we've been getting this money. And with that being said, we're still looking to procure other dollars in the future, hopefully too, we're not giving up on anything that's already out there too. So the grants that we've asked for, but there would be some type of a grace period for the option if somebody does have something. We don't have the exact timeframes, but I think we're looking like I think around 5 years for that. And
just as a follow-up, I think grace is different than grandfather. Grandfather would be that people who do have a compliant system wouldn't go on the system until something would happen to their septic. I understand about Rutgers, as someone from Rutgers here, if they need it, I can understand why they haven't. But many of us care about the lake too and have a system that protects the lake, have done it recently at a high cost. And so don't understand why there wouldn't be not just a grace period, but a grandfathering in a compliance system.
I don't know, except we also anything
We do have some limitations as well, once you have it available in the state of Minnesota where you are required to hook up. So they want to take advantage of that municipal system once it's available. And I think one of the things the board had talked about previously was that we're getting this going early, and even from today, you might have 7 years out of a 20 to 25-year lifespan on a system that you would have already used up. I don't know when you put yours in, certainly, but maybe you're 6 months in, maybe you're 3 years in, but they're trying to make sure as an allowance, the township is trying to make sure that any folks that have that situation do have a pretty good window of using what they already expended. To your other question that we kind of brushed over there, the removal, you're not required to remove it. That's something you could live with if you had it. I don't know whether you've got a mound system or a gravity system or tanks that are pumped. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. But you wouldn't be forced to remove that. That's something you could undertake or not undertake, depending on whether you wanted to use that footprint for other things. It sounds like you might not, as an example, and that'd be fine.
Yes, please. To you. Yes.
I'm confused about the grace period. If you don't connect, that means for 5 years, you don't have to contribute towards the cost of the main line running down the road. I'm not understanding.
You would still have your
what the grace
assessment.
period is.
So the grace period is from connecting actually to the system. The assessments generally happen right up front. So the assessments, once we get the project complete, we'll have an assessment hearing. That could be anywhere into, I think, what is it?
Could be this fall still.
This fall.
Yep.
And once things start, when we have that assessment hearing, then that assessment opportunity happens to either prepay something once it's set, or whether it's, if a person chose to pay it up front, else we can assess it over a number of years. Those start immediately once the services are available to you.
So
Again,
the grace period
The
then,
grace period is
it
actually.
involves that $2,000 connection fee.
Plus-
Or,
Yes.
and that's it.
Plus the monthly fee.
Well, right,
The
yeah.
monthly fee of what you would,
Yeah.
what you'd have there. So that's, the assessments happen, but the usage and the connection fee are the things that could be pushed off.
What we see in that, we're loosely using grace period, but let's keep using that. What we see in that period is that some folks want to hook up right away. Maybe they have a failing system, maybe they have a project they want to do, maybe they want to use their yard, who knows why. And so maybe they'll hook up and get hooked up immediately, but some either can't get a plumber in time because there'll be certainly a lot of work going on. Some may just not be ready for it yet. Some might want to save up for a few years. Any number of reasons why you might not connect right away in those first 5 years.
Sure.
How much do you expect to affect grandfathered outbuildings that are very close to the road?
I don't know.
Yes, I don't follow the question. I apologize.
There are outbuildings that have been grandfathered in and might
Right away.
be encroaching on the right of way or very close to it.
So the town, a good question. The town board's intent, as has been explained to me, and is to keep this corridor relatively narrow. The reason we've talked about that, and any of the board members can correct me, is that we have a relatively narrow road now and not much maintained beyond it, even where we have up to 70 feet of right of way in some instances. We have some that's 40 feet, some that's 60 feet, some that's 66, and some that's 70 along this corridor. It's a very odd right of way chunk. We cannot fit a new current road to state standards in there. So our intent is to take that road out that exists now and put it back in as it exists and not do any new ditching, not do any curb and gutter. When I say not any, there may be an instance somewhere where we have to put a short segment because of a wetland or something. But generally the township's intent is just to take what's there out and rebuild it as it is. That being the case, we don't need to meet all the clear zone requirements that we would need to meet for a whole new reconstruct on the road. So generally, they're going to try to keep that quiet. Now, I haven't looked at which specific building, for instance, those of you, if any, that were involved in the County 20 project meetings, there's one building on County 20, the yellow one, as you drive by, the yellow garage on the south side, that one had to be moved because it protruded 11 feet in and was very near the road right away. I don't know that there's a situation. I don't know that there's not a situation like that on this. Generally, however, the township's intent is that we've got a lot of those tree stumps that come down relatively near the road right away. And then we've got some buildings and other developments that generally would remain in place. Again, another question where we would be happy to come out and meet with anybody on their site and look at what those implications could or would be at a specific location.
When you hear terminology like equivalent residential units and the amount of waste that's gonna come out of Rutgers versus all of Lavinia, are you gonna charge the same per foot to somewhere that's gonna be maybe 300 units worth of residential?
Perfect question and a two-part answer. Rutgers is a great example. State Park is a great example. DNR is a great example. They all fit the same. There's two ways of looking at that and two charges that are up charges there through Rutgers. Whereas let's make this assumption that's not certainly perfect on most of you as residents, but some of you may likely have just one side. Rutgers will be assessed for both sides of that main that's going through, whereas assuming you only had one parcel on one side of the main, you as residents would be assessed for one foot there. Secondarily, they are going to be assessed based on the flows. So we've assumed 225 gallons per capita or per home per day, and they're going to be assessed proportionally times that. So if they're generating approximately 8,000 to 11,000 gallons a day, they're going to be assessed that proportion, which is 38 or whatever it is times what a single family resident. So they're kind of double hit there, yeah, appropriately so, to be charged for both sides of that main versus just one side per equivalent benefited foot and the flow.
What would you
Yep.
say about monthly fees?
Good question. Monthly fees would just be for those flows. They're going to be proportionally higher and it's multiplied by the comparison to a typical residence.
I have a question. Sure. Can you explain to me a little bit the gravity flow system with the pump and how that works? If, like, let's just say a big percentage of Lavinia leaks for the winter, does that system need a certain amount of flow? And will it, if it backs up, is there a safety trap?
So it does need a certain amount of flow, which will far exceed. It's only something like 10% of our total design. So we're well beyond that no matter, especially because we've got Rutgers on the upper end. And even though they slow down in the winter, they still are providing 4,000 to 5,000 gallons a day, even in the winter flows. Regarding backup, if you had to have a pump system, there's two check valves in every pump system regardless of brand. So those would be in line. One is on the backside of your system for that, let's say E1 unit. There's some on Shady Lane and a couple other places on the west side of the lake. And then one's on the front side, so between that pump and the lake, if that were to be necessary at a particular residence.
I want to make sure we're answering it right too. You're talking about for an individual, for yourself, for an individual homeowner, for his home, if he's not going to be there, do they have any concerns with not using
Nope.
lake water all winter long?
Nope, nope, you're good.
I think that happens currently in the Waville area, does it not?
There's a few
Yeah, that,
out of the 19.
yeah, that are over there, that they have a similar type
Is there a
system.
valve you can shut off or?
You can, yep. We sometimes caution unless you're gonna do it regularly. It's kind of like whether you're a parking brake person on your vehicle or not. Don't do it just once, but if you're gonna exercise that regularly, that's something you can do. If you were in that situation.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
I have a question. Since I'm just a seasonal resident, is the monthly $55 to $60, is that whether you're there or not?
That's every month, correct? Yes, yep, good question, very good question.
I just want to make sure people who haven't had a chance to speak yet.
You got it. I think Jeff is,
I have a question. We're in the phase two,
Okay, sure.
and so would we be assessed with the phase
you
one?
would not.
No,
Okay.
no, not until those services. I believe, is it correct that the way these generally work is assessment starts when they're available?
Yep.
So that's how, once the services are available to you, that's when the assessments, hearings technically happen.
Does that also include the pump station?
This, you mean the plant?
So that's everything. If that's been installed.
Sure. Okay, what was that? You could hear the question. Can
There
you,
was a question about whether phase two, there's a residence in phase two, whether they would be assessed immediately, and the answer is no. Not until that project would come. Secondarily, and I didn't quite understand the question about the pump
Well, I
station.
thought there was a difference between, you said the pump station was gonna be built no matter what.
Oh, the treatment.
Yeah.
The treatment, yes, no, not until you could, that's a good distinction. There would be no assessment until you, could actually connect to a functioning system.
And the other thing I was trying to point out with that too is the plant itself, say that's $6 million worth of grant money we got. A good chunk of that's gonna go to pay for the plant. So we're not assessing the plant dollars to the residents. And again, that's because that's something that potentially can serve the entire township. So what we're trying to do is only assess the cost of, say, the pipes that go to your house.
A collection
We're
system.
calling it the collection system.
sir, I think.
Jeff had
Go ahead.
Just living near the plant itself, we're concerned about smell and aesthetics. So what are our plans? Is there going to be?
And we actually had a good meeting about that, so I'm glad you brought that up. There were the residents, I think Enkel,
Yeah, I think so.
that live immediately south of it. And so we're doing a few things there, actually. It's going to be if you guys want, it can be a residential style building, like a garage or a steel building, something like that. We're gonna take advantage of the contours. We actually have a lot of contour there, so it's gonna be hidden by elevation. Additionally, we're gonna have a massive buffer, maybe as much as an 1/8 mile of the trees that remain in place. That's the visual, so you won't be able to see that from the road. Secondarily, for the smell, this mechanical black plant being packaged, the way it's being treated is by adding oxygen. There's no chemical being added. By adding oxygen, keep the bacteria happy that process the waste actually. So as long as nothing breaks down that doesn't allow that oxygen to flow, we don't have an odor. Additionally, we are putting it underground rather than dispersing it on surface at all. So that treated effluent that again is meeting the drinking water standard is dispersed underground by approximately 1 foot in a normal distribution bed. So there's nothing on the surface or exterior there.
How large of a facility is this?
That building, there's gonna be potential for 3 portions to it. That building could be as big as 80 by 80 probably. But then there's a tank that will be buried underground with a cover and then a storage shed. Yep. Great question.
Just an estimate, do you have of what the connection cost is going to be per foot from the house to the street? What's a plumber cost?
Roughly, we would expect plumbers might be in a $50 to $100 a foot range, but it really varies depending on how busy they are, what time of year it is, and who you talk to.
So if you've got 100-foot setback, you're talking another $10,000.
Yeah, you could be for that connection on the private side, depending on where you connect on. It'll depend on where your current system is, because that's some distance from the house. And wherever that system is, you could connect onto the existing.
So as Baylor was thinking, he would connect from his existing tank to the road?
Yes. That's what he'd be looking at generally, although, oh, absolutely, with a pump for his sake, yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the answer.
Yeah.
Would you repeat the question?
Sure. Can I read the question and say,
Absolutely. The question I believe was, what would a plumber's cost be? You know, I think you're getting at what extra cost additional you might have for a plumber. Although I can't speak for the plumber themselves, we expect to see somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 100 bucks a foot for their work on a sewer service. So you have that additional cost from there as well. On secondary question, I think was related to feasibility of actually doing it there. Yeah, and you can connect to any point within reason. That is, let's say, for instance, in order to get away from the lake and get onto some higher soils and maybe do less of a mound system, you have run a line already, 100 feet away from your house. And now you have another 100 feet on that you could connect on at that point if the gravity flow function for that. So each one will be unique for sure. And we hope that when we send out that survey, we might get a sketch back from you, for instance, of what kind of situation you have at your individual residence.
sir, back there, but
It's gonna be about 200 feet back.
Sure,
That's $20,000 addition.
could be, yep. And you'd want to talk to a plumber about that just to get an estimate. Depends on, for instance, it depends on how deep it is. Whether they have to go through any trees, or they have to go under a driveway or around a garage, that might get longer. Yep, there's a cost there for sure to connect.
Seems like people on Lavinia, for the most part, this is a solution in search of a problem. What percentage of the 14 million initial costs will Rutgers, the state park, and the country club pay?
so again, what we said here, there's a $14 million project, 6 million of it is through grant money already. The township is talking about $60,000 or $60,000 a year in township money. Roughly, when you look at the footages, what were we talking about, like the state park they're sizable. They're like in close to $1 million for the state park and the DNR.
Yeah, we have just shy of $1 million for the state park, for instance. And I think Rutgers, were we in five?
About $500,000.
About $500,000 for Rutgers, for instance.
It's not chump change. Like when we're talking about those, they're talking about a quarter of it possibly for just those entities itself.
Okay, so that's not included in the 6 million. They're going to pay that. And
That's part of the 6 million. That's part of the 6 million is they're paying that part of that. That's part of them. Like the 6 million is already given to us. The additional 6 million for the project, because like I said, the township's responsible is kind of planning it now about $1 million. Then there's an additional 6 million that would be assessed. About a quarter of that roughly is probably going to be bored by that would be assessed. Everybody would be bored by Rutgers and the DNR.
Those large users.
Those large users, just for that part, just for those two entities in themselves.
Good
Did
guy.
you consider just doing a project for the DNR, the state park and Rutgers? And then that stage 2 could be Lavinia and stage 3 could be someplace else? It seems like they have the need. I'm with that gentleman. Are we solving a problem? I'm uncertain what it is.
Well, okay.
Lavinia.
Yeah. We haven't, this is not a new situation, and I understand that we're well aware that some residents have systems that are functioning. We're very well aware of that. Part of the reason that we are successful in going down to getting grant money is to take care of problems that are out there, and problems that are out there, a lot of people don't know about them. We're trying to make sure those are available, and even though there's some of you folks that don't need this right now, there's many folks who call us who do need something, who have issues. When we were part of the JPB, how many times that we've sat through people buying back property lots, trying to cross lines of properties to get to where they need to go to make things work. That is a real problem. To build a system like this, we cannot functionally say, well, we're going to make it, but we're only going to pick and choose who we're going to put in there. We have to do something, and we understand. And like, we're trying to figure out ways to do this, to assess the right dollars to people, trying to figure out, give options for people who have invested significant dollars in the not so far past, and to make things work. But we're also trying to make sure that we are doing what we have went to the state legislatures and stuff, they're so generously granted us this money, and following through on what the intent was for that federal money, to make sure we're protecting the areas. And it doesn't work to sit there and just leave skip properties long-term.
To not do piecemeal.
Yeah. I know that's not what you guys all want to hear, and I apologize. I wish it could be something different, but nothing is ever 100% perfect, even though we're trying to consider as many concerns that you have. Go ahead, Mary. Go ahead.
Said that one of your concerns was about the health of Lake Bemidji. The environmentalist that worked for the state park has done a study since 2009, and the water quality of the Lake Bemidji right now is the cleanest it has ever been. Now, if you don't have that, I will give this to you. But also, if Rutgers is the problem, why were they allowed to remodel and do all that construction stuff without bringing their system up to date? It was like, it's an afterthought. Oh, yeah, they have to now do something about their sewer, but they already did X millions of dollars worth of remodeling up there.
So in defense of Rutgers, they have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars redoing their tanks to get in compliance with what they need to do to protect the water there. So they have put tanks in place, and they are pumping their tanks very, very regularly. I think multi times a week, if not 2-3 times a week, that they're taking care of that. They have been waiting to see if some project can happen so they don't build a whole system, although they've spent many, many thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars in pumping, that they could have put a tank in long term. They know the best situation from what the county has requested, the MPCA has requested, and all these federal agencies have said to get a municipal service system up with these lots. And like I said, with these very tight lots, many of us who are here have setbacks who are well within the 100 feet already, who, even though this gives us the flexibility to do more, a lot of us are already outside of it, already have variances that are being granted for that. So we're trying to take what's already out there, the problems that are already there that the Mississippi Headwaters Board sees, and to fix anything that's currently an issue, and hopefully help prevent something that will be in the future. I guess that's all I can really say.
Not waiting to see what was going to happen with the project when they got their building permit. What I'm saying is, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If I wanted to build a pole barn, I had to have my septic up to standard. It had to be inspected. They had to come out and tell me, yep, it's okay to build a pole barn.
And I will say that this conversation was outside of us. This conversation was with the MPCA, not with the Northern Town Board, and not with the city of Bemidji. The MPCA had this conversation with what was allowed and what was not allowed. This was not our conversation to say, go ahead and do whatever. Some of the building permits and stuff that were afforded, I guess I can't say exactly how that all came to be. I don't, Mike, if you can.
You know, this is the longest I've ever been quiet at a meeting. I mean, for those that come to meetings, this is the longest I've been quiet. And I want to back up first and make a distinguish between grace period and grandfather, because I don't think that was really settled in on what everybody said. Under what we're proposing, there is no grandfather. So the grace period is a period of time that individual property owners are going to have until they have to be hooked up. Mark explained that as potentially, as we sit here today, it's like a 7-year period. If we say we give 5 years from the time the system goes online, it's 2 years until the system's going to go online. That means you got 7 years. If you don't want to hook up on day one, you've still got, from today, you'd have approximately 7 years. A lot of systems, most systems have been in the ground at least 5 years. So now we're talking that your system, by the time you have to hook up, your system is north of 12 years in the ground. That's, according to most standards, that's half the life of a system. I realize these systems aren't 12 months out of the year, so you get more time out of your system. But I want to clarify that first. Then I'll flip you back to what happened with the Rutgers. The real basic thing of what happened with Rutgers, they were given the ability to go in, start their project, and they had an agreement on the books that they were going to update their system within X amount of time. They didn't honor that agreement. That was an agreement between Beltrami County and the Joint Powers Board at the time. That was the MPCA and other official regulatory agencies weren't involved in it. They should have had to update the system as they went before they were allowed to operate. That didn't happen. Consequently, this can has got kicked down the years, kicked down the road. That's where we're at today. But as Jess said, they have been very, very willing to try to work towards some sort of a permanent solution. One of the solutions would have been that they got annexed into the city of Bemidji. And that would have been just another phase of properties that we lost along Lake Bemidji and the ability for the city to keep marching north. And so they were a big part of what's happened here tonight, how we got to this point, but they're not the only reason. I've sat on this board for a long time, so does Jim Thompson. And the idea of protecting Lake Bemidji and the surrounding areas has been out here for a long, long time. Is Lake Bemidji cleaner today than it was 20 years ago? You can't argue with some of that, right?
I'd like to address that.
Yeah.
There's a difference between water clarity and clean water.
And phosphates and so forth, that is.
Right.
He has that information.
But if you're aware, zebra mussels are in the system and they've been responsible for the water clarity. It doesn't make it any cleaner. Nutrients are still in the system. They're tied up in zebra mussels. You can't sample them in the water. So there's a big difference there. And if the system's getting loaded with nutrients, those nutrients are coming back eventually. They're not tied up indefinitely. So you have to think about the invasive species and the results of the water clarity stuff. So it's not as simple as that the water's clear and also it's clean.
And I got to go back to just finishing up with the idea that the question about, it was explained to me by a city official not too long ago. Usually when an infrastructure project takes place, there's a third of the people that need it right away because they've got a problem. There's a third of the people that are okay. And then there's a third of the people that just are on the fence. Maybe it's okay, maybe it's not okay. I really don't care. But that third is shifting all the time. So I bet if we really went and inspected all the properties on Lake Bemidji, and that's that's the other option, and then we only try to have each property that is failing update their system, that's another way this could happen. But that isn't a long-term solution. That's a recurring solution.
So we've got some folks that haven't had a chance yet.
Haven't had a chance to talk. I think, have you guys, you not had a chance? Go ahead, please.
Who, me?
What, either one of you two.
How do we figure out where to connect up? The pipe goes through along the road and we got 100 feet of land.
So within your property, you can take whatever route you'd like to use to get to the city corridor or the township corridor, excuse me. So that there will be nothing forced by us. Typically, those conversations would happen with a plumber on site. They would have our plans for our as-built of how the road was constructed with the sewer underneath. And then they would make a recommendation of how to get there in concert with what you do or don't have for plans for the future. So some people might have a straight shot through an area of yard that would be super easy to do, but might want to have a garage there or a tennis court or who knows what. So you'd have to have a conversation individually with a plumber to address that.
And the place.
The connection.
So perfect secondary question there. We have the ability when we're out there doing the actual construction to put the service Y, it's called, along your property in a place that makes sense for you. And then that's permanently marked. So we have a GPS location of that at that point. And then that comes back and the plumbers just tie you right into it. But that brought up a good secondary question again, or secondary point is that if you're willing to have those interactions with us when we're on site, actually, we can place that. So let's say you have a 100-foot parcel. It's likely that there's probably only 40 or 30 feet that makes sense for maybe a stub to your parcel. But if you have a 200-foot parcel, now we really want to talk to you and see where you want that along there that makes the most sense for you. So we have that flexibility on where to put the service stub that comes out to the right of way.
So the way of finding it then.
Oh, yes, absolutely. There's tracer wire that leads out to those stubs. I see what you're asking.
Yeah, go ahead.
This may be an early question, but could you give us a ballpark figure on two things? First is what you think the average assessment would be for a cabin that has 100 feet on the road from when you can start using the system. And secondly, how many feet you anticipate you will be using into our property from the edge of the road?
Great questions. For that 100-foot parcel that she's asking about, let's just assume it was 100 feet wide and they were parallel sides, so that would be $16,500. That is currently $16,500. So that's where Chris was alluding to that $165 per equivalent benefited foot. That's your simple calculation there. Secondarily, we don't have the right, or the township doesn't have the right to go beyond that right of way with the service stub. So that's where that would be placed. So there wouldn't be anything on the township's project that would go beyond the right of way. And you guys all, you're in phase 2, so I can't say for sure. Mike, I think, is in phase 2 as well. But for those corridors of Lavinia, there's plats that you guys are all parts of there.
She asked the edge of the road, not the right.
Oh, the edge of the road's gonna vary. It could be anywhere from 2 to 18 feet, just depending, because that road swings back and forth and those right of ways change a lot. I think we have 7 different transitions of right of way, not counting some of the side streets that bump off.
Right, sir, in the back.
We got,
Both sides of the road, I pay. 300.
you do, yeah, correct. If you have parcel on both sides of the road, yes. Don't know for certain yet. Hopefully, when we get these surveys back, we'll have an impetus for deciding that. It doesn't matter to us, so we have no preconceived notion about whether it's westerly or easterly, with one exception. It seems like it's likely that most of the residences are on the lakeside, and because of that, we would probably want to do that temporary road on the non-lake side. That's just a generality. That is not a foregone conclusion in any means. But generally, I'm thinking that we put the sewer main on the lakeside and have that temporary road, which again would be in phases, on the opposite side.
Anybody who hasn't had a chance to speak yet?
This,
You had a chance? Good.
I'm curious as to how soon you could take advantage of the 100 feet back from the lake versus the 50 feet? And you have to wait until the entire project is completed?
not the entire, but until, when you're able to be served. So you would have to be able to be served, and correct me if I'm wrong, board, but you'd have to be connected as well. You would have had to connect to the system. Yep.
I'm in phase 2, so that was the way down the road.
Potentially, yeah, depending on, they have a number of applications in for additional funding that they're hopeful on, but it could be 1 year, it could be 15 years.
Hopefully not.
Good question. Right.
There's, yeah. Anybody else?
Joey's question on
What's
the
that?
100-foot lot.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like that got.
Oh, go ahead. Was there more?
16,000 connection fee, and then isn't that the plumber has to then loop you in?
Oh, and we can't speak to the plumber cost at all. No, we're sure, but it could vary wildly. If you're not connected in that first year, as I understand it.
That's the current plan is that if you didn't connect right away, there would be a $2,000 assessment fee. If somebody chose to hook up immediately, we probably would waive that 2,000. That's our current plan. That's what we currently are planning, is we waive that if a person hooked up or applied to hook up. If there is a plumber waited for something, the plumbers were shorted. We've discussed that. We don't have anything, but that's what we're kind of currently discussing.
But, and so
Sure.
what's not included in any of the assessment is the plumber fees, right?
Yeah.
Correct, that private.
Taking your system out.
Shouldn't to do that.
Yeah, taking your old system out depends on the type. If it's a tank, those can be crushed if you want. Most people don't want to, because if you ever build something over, it's still there structurally. But no, I don't have an estimate for that. When we do larger projects and they do multiple and homeowners choose to kind of gather together on those, it might be in the hundreds of dollars to abandon those, but certainly it could be well more than that, especially if you have a lift pump and a mound system.
I'm understanding it's here. It wouldn't be hundreds, it would be thousands.
Oh, for no question.
Well, why wouldn't I? I mean,
Okay.
there's cost to do all of that. I mean, this is thousands per homeowner more
Right.
than what you guys are saying is being assessed.
Yeah, it's beyond what's being assessed for sure. Yep, you have those costs to connect for your private side, just being available out through the right of way.
What was the fee per month? once you're hooked up.
55 bucks.
55.
Roughly 55 per month if you didn't
So you're
catch that.
looking at basically $150, $200 more a month to be on the system. Once all the assessment fees, et cetera, over that 15-year period. That's if no fees went up or anything.
Yeah.
So each person would be up for that. Plus all the plumbing.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, that's, I mean,
Rough.
I didn't do the math on, it, but I'm sure you would just obviously.
I was just roughing it out.
Sure.
But I can't tell because you don't know how much each assessment is per lot. Your assessment fee plus the monthly fee.
We do have we have the list here of the lots. So I mean, I know your equivalent benefited frontage not for phase two. I don't have that, but, for phase one, I do. So you can either look at this list or you can know your lot width, and you would know that fee or that assessment. Yeah,
I'd like to break it down. What's the monthly cost gonna be for 15 years?
sure.
So I did want to make sure that I grind the time. I know you have great questions. I'm not trying to just to turn this to a different direction, but we do have emergency services here. So if anybody has any questions, by all means, let's make sure we utilize their time too. If anybody has anything they want to ask of them, so. Sure. Sure, thank you.
So my question is, I'll stand up so
Sure.
everybody can hear it. When did this vote take place to move in this direction? Because I think there's a lot of people here on Lavinia, especially north of the boat landing, that didn't get to participate. So what was the date of the vote? And, maybe we have to start a petition because this is not something a lot of us really want for what you're sharing. It seems like I would rather actually even pay more money and have the Midgie take their system in or whatever it is, and even if it's more, because I honestly think it's a better system. I would rather have a better system than this system where the north of the boat landing is very scary, thinking there's not gonna be, I know you say it's not gonna break, but we all know about Waville. So I guess my question is, when was the vote taken and what was the ratio of vote saying, yes, we want this for our township? That's what
So I guess the question we haven't called for a specific vote, but we have had numerous meetings with our township we've sent out, and we had one at the fairgrounds back in 2021. We talked about different options about doing sewer and services at this area or in the area of the north side of the lake and around the whole lake. This is not something that's new. We've had township meetings and talked about this for years. At the meeting, we didn't even call for the vote, but I will say that a resident did call for a vote and said that for the residents there and said, who of you would like to be annexed? We did not have one hand raised, and there was, I don't know, was there six, how many people were there? Do you remember, Chris? It was hundreds.
It was hundreds.
It was hundreds. It was hundreds. And not one person raised their hand that they concur with your view. And we understand that this, like I said again, that this does not work this is not the ideal situation for everybody, but we are trying to make sure that we're doing what's right, and I guess what we're being targeted with. So this is not, I guess I feel bad that you don't feel like you've been heard or whatever, but I feel like we really have tried to be transparent and had meetings on an agenda for years on this subject.
And I'd like to follow up on two things there. As I said at the outset of my piece, I recognize at least half of the faces here from the meetings about this project. So this has not been hidden in any way. I apologize that you haven't specifically heard about it, but most of these plurality of these people have been here for these and asked lengthy, detailed questions, and we've had ongoing conversations. Secondarily, regarding the system type, I want to dispel that right away. The system is exactly identical operationally as the city of Bemidji's. That they have a mechanical plant, this is a mechanical plant, the same process. So it's not a lesser system in any way. I'm not sure where you grabbed that from, but that's not the case.
Can you also mention where it's dispersing to?
Say that?
Where it's dispersing to, lake versus the ground?
Oh, and we also have the additional advantage, thank you, Chris, that we are dispersing groundwater, drinking water treated effluent in the ground, not on the surface of Lake Bemidji where we're hurting the dissolved oxygen levels and the temperatures coming into the lake. So to try to take that 2 million gallon a day facility that they have and add this unnecessarily adds more flows through the lake itself directly to surface water.
Because that's where they are dispersing.
Currently, they disperse right into urban, in the river there. Yep.
Sure.
Yeah, from start to finish for Lavinia Road, how long do you expect the construction to take?
The hope would be that we could get that done over the course of a couple months, but Construction is tough that way. That is our hope. We have discussed the potential, and we have not settled on it, but being that this is so critical and so lengthy at a mile along there that everybody's back on the end of, we've discussed the potential to have an incentive for the contractor to try to increase the speed of that construction. Whether that means getting another crew in there or what, there's that potential. Could be 6 weeks, could be 3 months, just depending on how that goes through there. Good question.
One more thing I just wanted to quick before we move on to your question, Lewis, that we have been trying to send out newsletters basically quarterly, sometimes even more often with different information. So I hope you guys are seeing those. If for some reason you're not seeing us on the website, let us know because we have the addresses. We've been sending out mailers. I mean, if you haven't been, make sure you let us know because we've been sending out monthly or not monthly, quarterly little newsletters about what our township's doing. We've been trying to communicate with our residents the best we can. And I guess we haven't been getting a lot of ones returned here in the mail, have we, Chris?
Some of them. Another thing worth pointing out though too is on the website, there's a form right on the main page and you can sign up for our email list. And I would highly encourage everybody to put their emails in there.
I finally got the first one.
We haven't sent out anything other than the notices for this meeting through that list. It's only been up there for like a month or two, I believe. But regardless, the best thing you can do is put your emails on there. And just like Jess was saying, we're gonna have quarterly newsletters going out via email from here on out throughout the entire project and beyond.
And meetings here 2 times a month.
Yes.
Those are great if you want to join.
Mr. I want to clarify one other thing there on some numbers here, because as these numbers get, for an hour and a half now, we've been throwing these numbers around. These are the numbers that we've been given up to this date. If we're fortunate to potentially, we've got other grant applications out there. If we receive other grant applications of any amount, 1 million, another 5 million, or whatever the case might be, before we would start a project, that would help to lower the project. Chris and the staff have done an excellent job. They're aggressively looking for these grants. We make no promises. That's why we're giving you the numbers that we have tonight. But there is one number out here that I want to at least hedge on. Whether it ends up being a $2,000 to $2,500 or a $3,000 collection, connection fee. Those numbers are a little fluid yet because a lot of it depends on how the bids come in and what happens, along that line. So, don't go away tonight thinking that I'm going to be in the neighborhood of, you're going to be in that neighborhood, but it could be $500 more or $500 less thereof. So I hate it when we start throwing these numbers out when we don't know for sure, but we're trying to give you the information we have. That's what we're doing.
You have something to say in favor hand for a while.
That was my question.
Okay.
Because Chris said, maybe there's more grants, maybe there's some bonding, maybe there's some, and you're talking big money.
And interest rates.
And so my question was, and Mike kind of answered it, how would you see reducing the burden on us in the case that you do get some big money?
That's a question. And you guys would be looking at reducing.
Yeah, actually, Mark Borsa, do you mind answering that question? So if we got a big grant, let's say, like what that would do for some of the financial analysis?
Sure, yeah, so the, kind of the way it's all looked at being funded is, there's the phase 1 is about a little over 13 million. The 6 million coming off of that, we've got balance of about 7.5 million. That's the amount that would be bonded for or borrowed to pay for. Assessments would cover the debt service for the township for the length of that bond, which would be equivalent to that assessment time. So typically, I think what that would do, where the change would probably come in is the target. This is a board decision, but the target right now is 60% of the collection system is what the assessment rate is started at. So if there was a larger grant dollars, then that would reduce that debt service and that would probably reduce that per rate assessment. That would be what I think it would probably, the way it would shake out. And there's the story for this project with the state legislature, which is very, very good for the water, solving these kind of problems. So I would think the likelihood of getting something more is good, but again, like Mike said, they're just trying to portray what is the worst case scenario if no further dollars came in, and that's what it is. The other things that might change, interest rates are really high right now. They might be coming down. That sounds pretty probable. By this time, that could be a better scenario, so.
Do you need board approval to bond? You don't.
No.
Would you like it?
I think we've got two gentlemen that haven't said anything.
So this is a done deal, no matter if everyone in this room said, leave Lavinia Road pristine the way it's been all the years we've lived on it. So there's no question. There's no vote against this. There's nothing. It is a done deal, you're telling us. Someone answer me.
We're planning on moving forward. We're planning on moving forward. We've secured money. We've been going forward with this. Again, like I said, it's very unfortunate that if you folks that haven't been here, that for all these years and stuff that haven't been campaigning against this, I mean, I know that you guys, some of you folks, like I said, may not need this, but our plan is that we have the money in place. We are planning on going forward.
And the other thing is, for the people who are summer residents, we're here 4 months of the year.
Okay.
And you're telling us we still have to pay the $500 and some dollars.
A year? $50 a month?
$50 a month.
Yeah. Yes, for when it's available, yes. That's typical.
Taxation without revenue.
That's typical of Stewart properties and,
In any city.
yeah,
Anywhere.
of any city, of any, that's part of the luxury. We live on the lake and we're trying to take care of it, folks. I understand the concerns. I understand finances. We want to do what's best. We are trying to hear our residents. I know there's some of you that, like I said, are saying this. We also hear from many, many residents on this area who have issues. We have fought with these issues for years with the JPB about lots that are too small, people that are within 40, 50 feet of the lake already, and they've been grandfathered in, and with always the intent of hoping that this would happen someday. I know the JPB approved many variances, sometimes to Mike's chagrin at some of the JPB meetings, when they approved variances for probably some of you folks for houses that were built greater than the lots were allowed because of variance, because the intent and the plan was to someday have some services available. Like I said, there has been newsletters, there has been meetings, there's been, I think, Doc Thompson for years talked about these things at the city council meetings when we did the JPB stuff. So I apologize, or I feel bad that this is being sprung, but it's kind of astonishing that it is.
We still have a gentleman in green over here that
Typical distance between the lift station.
it varies. There's 5 lift stations on this phase of the project, and it widely varies depending on the slopes. So there would be one on or near Birchmont Court, one that sits just east of Rutgers, one that sits right by the golf course utility shed on the east end of the golf course, one that sits by the fish cleaning shack in the state park, right before the boat access there. And then one that sits in the southern end of the lowest point of Lavinia there before you start to climb back up the hill.
Where's that in relation to?
Northerly, yep, north of the boat ramp, near that wetland that goes off to the east, north of Hills and that stuff, the JNZ and Parkview, north of that.
Is that your problem area? Swampy.
Most of it is, most of it, by the time we're, till we get up out of that water table, most of that's the problem area, which is the whole reason this project exists, to be forthcoming. We're looking at this 1,000-foot setback approximately as that starting point, which is the shoreland buffer around the lake that we're trying to protect, where parcels are small, soils are poor, and groundwater elevation is high. That's what really drives a project like this, is that need. And I think, as you folks drive up and down Lavinia, you'll see, and it's scary to me because I guess I've lived here all my life as well. And it's scary to me to see those parcels that don't have a septic system up above the ground. When I'm looking and seeing water seeping on the ground when it hasn't rained for 4 or 5 days and there's no mound system in the yard. We can talk about your system being brand new, ma'am, but that's not the case for a good bulk of them. A lot of those are marginally or maybe not functioning, or as we found at our Wheeler's Point project, we had a number of straight pipes and cesspools.
I was just wondering, when all is said and done, and you take a Lavinia Road, crumble it up, put in your pipes, everything's done, will I still recognize Lavinia Road? Will it kind of look like it does now?
I may have inartfully said that earlier, so I tried to make that point earlier, that we don't have the space to meet any standards. I'll say this again, so we have to take the road out as it is and put it back as it is. So we're not adding ditches. We don't have the space to do that, nor do we have anywhere for that water to flow. Oh, we can't add storm sewer. So yes, generally that would be exactly what you'd see.
All of them would be.
So I tried to make that point, I think, to your question about the buildings as well, in that stuff that's in the right of way, the general township intent is to try to not touch that stuff where at all feasible.
Because Whitetail Road has just been absolutely devastated on both sides in that for the construction. That's not gonna happen in Lavinia?
So Whitetail Road, I'm not familiar with the construction that, oh, you're talking about the beach in Wild Plum. Oh, Beach and Wild Plum. Yes, great question. Beach and Wild Plum, the township is doing a full reconstruct with state dollars. So we have to meet state requirements and the township clears the right of way fully. So when they reconstruct a road to meet state standards, as I alluded to earlier, we have to have our clear zones, our ditch separations, our appropriate in slopes and back slopes, and we clear the entire right of way for that. Yes, that's the distinction and a good one to wrap back around for everybody there. We cannot do that there. We don't have the space to do that in this case. And we can't meet state standards there. A good question. I'll allow you, yeah, go for it.
I need for Culligan Water or water services.
There's another question from a gal who hasn't.
Land itself.
There will not. There will be trucks that go in and out sometime through the year, but other than that, no. No. What's that? Yes, noise during construction, absolutely. I cannot downplay that at all. Substantial noise from dewatering and from bulldozers and blades and excavators and yes, substantial noise during construction for those periods.
Facility itself, taking out a very small portion of that 80 acres.
The treatment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that land still gonna be available to use
It
by the general public?
It is actually, that was a question that came up early on and I was not able to answer. We had to go to our dispersal designer and you can ride four-wheelers over it. You can deer hunt over it. You can do all that stuff. The intent for that dispersal corridor is that there would be small runs, small pipes being forced out in what's already existing as corridors there. And when we were out there, we saw a number of deer stands hung, including by Wade that works for me, who lives just north of the parcel. So yes, that will still be allowed. Now, around the buildings and the treatment facility, that will be fenced and not available. Yep.
You have your hand up? In the back? You have your hand up, sir? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, when one of your lift stations goes down on the 4th of July and you're getting all backed up, who do we call? Who's gonna services massive system?
Yeah, you call the township. They'll have a yep, they'll have a representative that runs that system. No doubt.
This isn't something where you just don't have an operator who is in charge of the system. This is something where you have an operator, just like the city.
It's a full municipal system.
It's a system that we'll have an operator who's gonna be on call and we'll probably have intentions of having backups or whatever it might entail. So we don't get the luxury of putting a system in place and saying, we'll just risk it and see what happens. That's part of the thing you have to do. You have to run it and we have every intention. You guys, again, we started out with the presentation and I'm not trying to digress here with why this is a great place to live. We truly believe it. we don't want to make that worse. This is not about trying to make it so we don't come on those lists anymore. We're trying to improve the areas. And this isn't about, we want to put something out here that's going to be a cheap system, that's going to be a negative with things backflowing into your system. If there's concerns with what we're doing, we plan on getting a list of preferred vendors and stuff of who can do this with getting references when we put a system like this in place. This isn't something where we're going to go and just try to skimp and save every dollar. We understand and appreciate the value that you people have put into your houses. That's what makes Northern Township what it is. We're not going out here to try to put something less than ideal or less than the situation that we all deserve to have in this area. So I understand the concerns, and if we have issues like that, we need to take care of them, and we're planning to take care of those right now as we go. But you have a chance to speak yet? No, go ahead, please.
Steve Jagger, Lavinia. So we were at the last meeting and you said that, okay, in terms of like cost, Laura was saying we just had a 30% increase in our taxes. What makes me nervous with this project is to see that
you're estimating $20 million to do this, you have 6. So then that just speaks volumes to this bonding, this assessment, and the costs just sound
Well, again,
a lot more than you're
Sure.
alluding to, so.
So the 20 and the 6, I apologize,
Sure, go ahead.
the 20 and the 6 are unrelated. But they're not related in any way. The 20 million is if phase 2 was to go as well. That would be a combination of phase 1 and phase 2. And the 6 million is only tied to phase 1.
so
Yep,
that's
so-
where, we're talking, like I said, you guys, I mean, if we look at the city of Bemidji and stuff, when they have these things, that they've had the luxury, and unfortunately, they've had to, we've almost gotten nearly 50% match on this whole project overall. I mean, we're extremely proud of that, to do a system like this, that we're so fortunate to get that kind of dollars. Many times these kind of situations have come about where people are being assessed 100%. We're so thankful that we don't have to even go there. That's why we've been working so hard to get money. This other 6 million or 7 million for that north half, the reason that we're not doing that right now is because we don't have more bonding dollars yet. We're not going to plan on doing that until we have a financial situation that makes sense for that. And if that means that there's dollars for bonding, that's what it takes, and that's what we have to do. We have to be smart about it and make sure we're not hurting our residents.
Thank you for clarifying though, that we don't have that, any connection between the 20 million and the 6 million.
I know that I've repeatedly heard in this room, the number one concern being the cost to the landowners. And we have a 100-foot lot that our house sits on. We have another 125-foot lot our house does not sit on. And it's a completely different parcel. So if I have to pay the assessment fee on 2 of those parcels, the $2,000 hookup fee, the plumber's fee, the tank removal and mound fee removal, and to re-landscape, I'm looking at least $60,000.
If you have both lots, if you have 2 lots and 2 houses that are,
I have no house.
well, then why would you put I mean, you're not even probably putting
You wouldn't put a septic or a connection in the second one.
septic fee or a connection if you don't have, if you have a house that you don't have, we're not gonna make you put a stipend on
No,
a vacant lot.
no.
Like thinking that.
That's me,
Well,
that
you'll pay for-
$18,000
you'll
to
pay-
go buy my house, that piece of property.
You would pay the assessment certainly because you could sell that parcel tomorrow.
And that's happened for,
You could sell that
so,
parcel.
you know, the reason that this makes sense and the reason that we do it this way is to make sure that the places like the Rutgers and the DNR and the state park, that they are paying their fair share of this. So it's not just the residents. That's why we do it this way, to make sure, so the parcels that have significant usable footages, they're paying their fair share, whether it be the state park, but they're paying a quarter of the, if not possibly more between everything with them for that. That's why we use that. So the people who have the large square footages are paying it, and that helps all of us hopefully here.
Basically, I have to sell my property so I can
Well,
pay for this.
I don't know like why I'm not gonna get into that debate with you, ma'am, so go ahead. Back there, you had your hand up, ma'am?
Okay,
No, I'm sorry, the lady right in front of you had her hand up a minute ago. Sure.
5 lift stations and 1 on Lavinia. Can you tell me exactly where that is on the map?
Yeah, do you mind pulling up that first map? Chris? And when we say exactly
What
now,
do they look like and how big are they?
Uh,
Where's their location to the road?
who's asking that?
That's the guy behind you right there. Where the guy right behind you, in the pink.
Oh, gotcha. Lift stations underground are anywhere from 18 to 30 feet deep. At the surface, they have a lid that's 8 feet to 12-foot diameter, surface flush, and a control panel that's about the size of that map there. Stainless steel control panel, about 3 by 5 and about 2 feet deep, with a light on top and a vent cap coming out. The best example for you to look at, it's easiest to find, is at the roundabout by Deep Rock Conical, where it used to be Deep Rock Conical. Look in the southeast quadrant of that intersection. There's a lift station pad there. That's a very good example. There's 5 or 6 on Birchmont as well. That lift station, everybody see that from here? Especially, feel free to come on up if you want to look. I don't have a better way to show it. But if we know where that wetland complex is that comes down and meets the road on the east side, right near there, that's the lowest point. And lift stations need to be near or at the lowest point in order to function.
Which side of the road is it?
I don't know yet. East or west, it could be either one. East seems more likely. Just space constraint, but it doesn't have.
So it could be on our property.
Well, no, it wouldn't be on your.
Right, the current, the drains,
Sure.
was right between my place and his.
Yep. So that lift station will be somewhere within 200 feet of that location, either way. Yep, good question.
All right, so. So anybody who has not who has a question, do you have a question down in the very back?
My concern is, this is going to put me out of my home. I'm not gonna be able to afford to live. I'm gonna have to sell my house I love. It would be cheaper to put in a holding tank, which you could inspect yearly or whatever, and have it pumped out once a month. I mean, this, I'm all in favor of clean water, but I'm retired. I live by myself. I am not going to be able to afford this, and our taxes keep going up and up. Yeah, it's a good idea, but it's unaffordable. I don't want to sell my dream home.
All I can say is that our intent is that we don't want to see that happen for anybody. I think with, like I said before at the very beginning, like I told you when you asked this question at the beginning, if there's financial hardship considerations, I think we would have intentions as a town board to try to work with those individuals that have those situations, that we can help work with you. So you don't have to have that. We don't want to see anybody get kicked out of their house. So like I said, when those things come about, I think our town board would be receptive to having discussions with people who have proven financial hardships.
What would be wrong with having holding tanks and having them just pumped out?
Well, Mark, can you say that?
That's something that most people try to avoid because of that ongoing expense that is massive. In fact, you know, like we're alluding to Rutgers, they're living with that full time. If holding tanks were feasible, you would see more people using holding tanks. They're just infeasible from a flow standpoint.
You know, I did need a holding tank when I had, an operating compliant mound system, but it's just, I look at for the, whatever the 30,000 this is gonna end up costing after everything, that's a lot of pumping up. And why also can you put meters on this so people will be charged for the amount of sewage that they are creating?
Typical is that only non-single family residential gets metered. Typically, you don't meter flow for sewer. And even in, say, for instance, the city of Bemidji, they meter the water flow and tie that to the sewer, but there's still that flat fee that makes up the bulk of that cost. Yep, so it's just.
Yeah, totally understand your intention there, would be, but you see everybody's concern here. And to me, it just seems to me like Rutgers, State Park, the DNR have an issue. And us as landowners on Lavinia don't really have an issue or on the hook for paying for it.
Well,
That's not true.
yeah, I understand.
And I think that's a good thing to bring up, because I think Jess, we gotta go back to what he mentioned there, and actually Mike brought it up as well. Quite the opposite is the case, given that two factors. One, that they've got $6 million in grant that's going toward the treatment system. So you are only paying your proportion of the collection system. So it's quite the opposite of what you just said. You're only paying for that portion of the collection system that benefits you.
I understand that, but a great majority of us don't even need it.
So, and that, I can't speak well to that, with the exception of if an individual system hasn't been replaced in the last 25 years, for instance, we have no way to know whether it's functioning or not functioning, unless you were going to go out and inspect. And that's where Mike was saying, some communities have gone and started doing inspections on everybody. Problem is, you get folks like yourselves that come in then, because the MPCA, once you do that, requires that you address it in 16 months. And now you get to go spend your $20,000 to replace the septic, or your neighbor does, because they found out that it wasn't compliant, which undoubtedly at least 50% of these would be non-compliant. Again, detriment to all of us. Again, I live here, detriment to all of us who have the groundwater that we're feeding off of here.
And one more thing that I'll go back to again, one of the big things that we see with this too, and with, we know, like I said, we've sat on this board, I've been on the board or on the planning commission for a number of years, and I've been on the board for, I think, 6 years or so now, or 7 years, whatever it is. We've been through so many, like I said, I see many of your faces here who have came and requested variances for things to happen on your properties, and I'm not gonna point out names and stuff, to have houses built on substandard lots, houses that are closer to the lake than ordinance and Mississippi Water regulations allow. And we have worked with people to grant those with the intent and the hope that someday we could find something to make that work. We also realize that, like I said, that we have watched people come and have to buy lots. We had people come and ask to cross somebody else's property, to take a line to a back lot, to have for a septic system because their current system fails. This is not like a one-off situation that we're talking about, just one location here that we've heard it for. It has happened numerous times. And like I said, I completely respect, and we knew that there are some that don't need this right now. We hope that you can see the benefits of what you can do with your properties. Hopefully you can see a benefit with having, the bedroom situation doesn't become an issue. Hopefully you can, if you want to put a deck on towards the lake and do something like that, we hope that you can see the benefit of that. We understand that some people, it won't do anything for you, but we hope that it does for the majority. That's what we're trying to take care of. That's all I guess I can say. Go ahead, Mike.
You know, one thing I sat on the board when Birchmont Drive was annexed into the city or it was impending annexation into the city of Bemidji. So there was a move to put in water and sewer up and down Birchmont even before it got annexed into the city. And which Northern Township had to be part of it. We had to okay it because they were still in the township. In that case, the road was county. And the county kicked in a huge amount of money to put the road back down. In this case, the township as a whole is going to put Lavinia back down. It isn't part of the project cost. So that's something the township is trying to do. For years and years, folks, this was unavailable anywhere in the township because of the income level in the township. You can go to a lot of places, a lot of small communities, and they have water and sewer and fire hydrants everywhere. And they're very small communities. The income level on Lake Bemidji made it very hard to obtain state and federal grants because we just didn't qualify. That changed in the last 10 years. Clean water became a real big push. Whether you could afford it or you couldn't afford it, it became a big push. That enabled us to go out and get some of this grant money. If we could wait, if this project could wait another 3 years, we could maybe get more grant money. But the county has been gracious enough to postpone their project. So it's a catch-22. We either do the project now in conjunction with the county or ask the county, can we go up and tear up their brand new road in 5 years if we get some more money to lower the cost of the project?
At your cost.
Yeah, so it's not an easy time for the township to try to make this decision either. But I'm sorry. I sat here before on the same scenario. Some people on Birchmont Drive wanted it. Some people didn't want it. Some people said, well, whatever. But their caveat, not only did they get it, they got annexed into the city. Not only did they get annexed into the city, they got a hell of a lot higher taxes because of that. And they still have the same police protection. They still have the same fire protection as you folks do. So this also enables us to move towards the direction that we can maintain Northern Township as either Northern Township or if we end up being our own village or city or whatever the case might be. But it hopefully helps us stave off annexation a little bit longer. So I know I sense your frustration. I hear it. I told the board that there's going to be a lot of people that aren't in favor of this because there's that 1/3 that don't need it. There's that 1/3 that don't want it. And then there's a 1/3 that do need it. So that's where we're at. We're doing the best we can for the overall township. I'm sorry, like Jess says, we can't make everybody happy, but we also have our marching orders from a lot of people. So, thank you.
Yes, good.
One more question. I hear a lot about how you got the cost under control and you know where the money's coming from and where you're going to spend it and so forth. This is kind of a little side note, but I'm wondering why the township spent money to repair Lavinia Road if we're gonna tear it up next summer.
Kind of funny story there. We told the people, it is funny, you'll hear it and you'll kind of laugh. We told the contractor not to do it. They came and they did it anyways because we had asked for a quote and we saw the price and they did it. And then they came back and they're not charging us for it. We're not paying for it. The contractor made a mistake and was not supposed to do it and they did it anyways.
Well, you will think that's
Yeah.
funny.
We're not paying for it because the contractor was not supposed to do it. Yeah, it was a freebie. So the reason, and I will say one more reason, the reason why I was even approached was because we had numerous residents down in your area complaining and asking to have us check it out. So we did want to get it because we knew there was numerous people who were concerned. And I don't know who it was who came to our road supervisor and were asking about it. So we did get a price and we saw the price was $25,000 and we said, no, we're not spending $25,000 to do that road when we're planning on tearing it up in a year or two. Mike noticed it, drove down there. He said, why did we do that? And then we started doing research and Chris found the emails telling the contractor, take off Lavinia, don't do Lavinia. They did it anyways. And the contractor, he said, that was our error. We will not be charging you for it. So, yeah. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
How are we planning to, protect the pristine Bemidji Lakeshore and stuff from Rutgers building multifamily housing units or condos or apartments, and living in marinas and all things like that? In my opinion, negatively affect the lake and the lake traffic and the environmental concerns and everything else. But that's a concern of mine that we have 200 new multifamily housing units and a marina on the lake and the lake loses its quietness and things like that. Is that taken into consideration with this? Are we planning to, consider what the effects of that will be? Letting people know that that's an option here that may happen, as we may end up with condos and apartments and all these things on quiet North Lake Bemidji.
I think honestly, like my intent and my thought always on that was that we've always thought that what's a concern, we're trying to keep Rutgers as what Rutgers is. I mean, that is part of the reason that we're doing the best we can. I mean, I don't know, that's always been the potential. When that was sold a number of 5 years ago, that was what we thought was gonna happen, was it was gonna be torn down and turned into condos. So we're happy that Rutgers is still Rutgers. I guess that's I can only speak for myself personally. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say, but there's always capabilities, but we're hoping that they continue on doing what they're doing, and I don't know what to say to that, I guess.
Well, you'll have the ability to allow them to do that or not to do that, whether it's for your intentions.
I guess, we never talked about it as a board to let them do a big multifamily or big development. There's rules that are allowed through the Mississippi Headwaters Board. I think we wouldn't be looking to vary.
For unit counts and everything,
Yeah,
yeah,
we wouldn't be
densities.
planning on deviating from those.
And expansion at Rutgers is certainly possible, feasible, and permitted under our present planning and zoning and the rules that are in place. So to think that they have no ability to ever expand there and that Northern Town Board has any ability to stop that, I think that's probably not realistic.
I'm not putting in a sewer system to stop them.
No, because then they have the ability to put it in their own system and still do it. So, no.
They would pay for it.
Yeah, they're paying for they're gonna pay their fair share on this system too.
The price is substantial what they're paying. Like I said, it's substantial dollars in the substantial monthly user fees, the substantial connection fees. The dollar figure for their system that if they put a new system in is not very greatly from what they're paying for us, but they've been good partners in talking about you, that they see that the benefits, they've heard the MPCA strongly encourage them to do this. The MPCA strongly wants them to do this. They paid for dumpage fees for numerous years at high dollar values because the MPCA has pushed that they hope that they would put in some type of system that would solve the problems they've had there for years because of the area. That's all I really can say. I'm not the owners, but.
I have a question on the trenching. From the edge of the pavement, is the construction going to affect how far? You're putting it on the west side of Lavinia.
Potentially on the west side. And not, when I say west side, I mean westerly of center line.
How much?
Very variable, and I think somebody else asked that exact same question a little bit ago, if you didn't catch that. Anywhere from a few feet to 15 or 18 feet, depending on where that right of way is.
You're going to replace that.
If we have to cut through a driveway, yes. If we take out bituminous or paver stones or concrete, that gets replaced as part of the project and is in the budget. Yep, but not past the right of way. Just to the right of way or inside. So for instance, where there's I apologize, where there's a 70-foot right of way and we maybe have a 22 or 23-foot driving surface, half of that remainder of right of way has to be traversed there. So maybe that's 18 or 19 or 20 feet potentially. But where there's a 40-foot right of way with a 21-foot road, now between the two sides, we have very little left to go there to get to the right of way.
Being in Liquid Road, we have a stand of cedars at the top of our drive that are over 100 years old. They are close to the road. Are you taking them?
So they've been there almost as long as Rutgers has, interestingly, not quite.
Say that you're gonna encroach, and I realize that I treat that property like it's my own.
As most people do. Yeah.
Sea breeze coming down. I mean, it is frightening to look at Beach Lane and what it looks like now with all those trees
Right.
coming down.
And if I wasn't clear before, I want to be clear again. Beach Lane, Wild Plum, not Whitetail, but Beach Lane, Wild Plum are a full reconstruct. We've got that. This is not a full reconstruct. This is a surface reconstruct. We want to discuss with anybody on the project anywhere in person, if you want to have a meeting with us about what it would be. That would be something that could take place late fall potentially.
Well, to go.
And I brought cards for whoever wants to take cards.
To bring back to Beach Lane and Wild Plum quickly, that's another project we were fortunate to get grant dollars from the DNR State Park Trail Program. The reason that we started pursuing that was we have heard for, I'm not sure if any of you people have been the ones who have had issues with that road, but that road has been an issue every spring, and so we're trying to fix it. I mean, that's generally is not our intent, is to create ditches, but we've known that that road is an absolute disaster every spring, so we're trying to fix it. That's the goal here, and like we were very fortunate that we received 3/4 of that money to be paid for through a grant. So we've been really pursuing different opportunities to try to make things better, and that's not what our intentions or our plans are, is to do something like that down Lavinia. That's not nothing we've even discussed.
We can't, no.
No.
What if the state gives you another $5 million for the road, you have to follow that down the window?
We would not apply for it. We haven't applied to.
What's that? What are you talking about?
He asked what if they give you another $5 million for the road and you have to apply for it? The money that was for Beach Lane and Wild Plum was State Park Road account dollars that they applied for, that were specifically had the requirement of, one of 5 requirements was it must meet state aid design standards.
Right. Oh, you just keep saying that you're continually applying for funds, and that may be something else.
For sewer funds,
Not these funds.
Correct.
Different, yeah.
Good question.
Sorry.
And there's a gentleman here in the mask shirt that's had a question for a bit now.
Sure.
Yeah, what was, so you're gonna Y off for each individual place?
Correct.
What size PVC are you gonna be running?
4 inches, very typical for us. If somebody has a massive house, something with, more than 8 bedrooms, we might consider 6, but 4 inches typical.
4 inches.
Yep, good question.
What's gonna happen to live on Swan Lane and some of the other lanes that aren't directly on Lavinia, that are actually living on Lavinia? Are they gonna have to connect up too?
I'm not sure like where that's at exactly, so I think
Just up. Lavinia,
so.
1 street over.
So the area that we've put it's a place that within the Mississippi Headwaters Board, what is it called? Chris, remember what it's called?
It's like the shoreland.
Yeah. So it's within 1,000 feet of the shoreline. I'm not sure exactly where that property's at. I think it's
Well,
slowly.
it's west of Lavinia Road and between Lavinia and the lake. There's several little lanes and.
I'm sure that'll be.
By Mallard and Teal and all those, absolutely, those are all to be served in phase 2. Every single one of those would be served in phase 2. And we can look at that map once we're wrapped up and kind of into individual questions as well. Yeah, Mallard, Teal, Blueville, maybe, yeah.
See, Mr.
Right.
Chair.
Sure.
We get to the,
Oh,
any questions?
Yeah, I know these gentlemen, I think they were being gracious. Is there any questions that you guys would have for these gentlemen here for emergency services right now? Is there anything you guys have? Thank you guys for coming. You don't stick around anymore, but I appreciate your time being here.
Spending your change.
for fire, yes, absolutely. Mike, she asked if they're served by Bemidji Fire.
Absolutely, yep. The Northern Township, along with 12 other local units, development contract with the city of Bemidji to provide fire services. Matter of fact, Mike Kelly here on your town board of supervisors is the liaison on the Rural Fire Association. We meet quarterly, annually, what have you. Yes, Bemidji Fire Department does serve.
And importantly, on that note, Mike could speak to it in more detail. Mike. Kelly. But because you have that fire service available and the fire station is at 4, is that the one up?
Station 2 down in Nymore and Station 4 is up north.
Those both reduce your insurance massively by a different ISO rating. So it's a advantage we have, and I have the same where I live over in Echoes.
You didn't have to get in to make an agreement on.
For fire, correct.
That's
That's been in effect for.
We had a question back here. Sure. Sir in the booth.
Considering include water, is there any chance that there would be, water extraction from the lake?
Mike, can I speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
We actually brought that up, and Mark Borseth, who represents the township as well, mentioned that since we will have to have a water supply at our treatment site, that do we look at a variable frequency drive pump that could be a secondary connection? Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys don't prefer to have to go out of a dry hydrant in a lake if you can avoid it because it's not pressurized.
We need running water, we can use 365, so we could never put a pipe out to Lake Bemidji. In the middle of winter time, we can dig a or a hole out there and what have you, but time is of the essence, so we typically run with what we call water tenders and we're shoveling, so.
We have a misunderstanding, but with an access at the river. Mississippi.
Correct.
Yep. Would there be any chance, because there's multiple public accesses along Lavinia that would serve to be able to have those?
So the reason why that pipe is in there, again, water's always flowing through that Mississippi River there by Sherman Drive on Lake Avenue is what you're talking to. Yes, so a pipe just out in a stagnant, sorry, not stagnant water, but into a lake does not serve a fire department because that has a potential for freezing.
There was one on Bass Lake.
On,
Lavinia.
yep, so that's a little interesting out there too, but that drops off so quickly out there. The DNR is well involved with that type of stuff and kind of gives us the geologic or the long-term water, what have you. So there's, I think there's flowing wells out there or something, but they said that that's a reliable water source. So we've got the dollars and putting something there. Yep, they're a benefit. There's no fault.
But there's a chance that we could have a pressurized source that could be a feed for the fire department as well, potentially.
Looked at the environmental impact of removing the mounds. I mean, are there any rules that?
Just MPCA rules for that, no, and that's a very standard thing. So as long as a contractor does it within those MPCA standards, they don't need a permit for that to remove that, or if it's a tank, it can be crushed and filled, actually. So yeah, very, very straightforward on those.
When are you gonna make, we're on the property that's gonna get that lift station?
Or near it, yep.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, we're really concerned about where is that gonna go?
Sure, and we can't say that location for sure yet because the design isn't done.
Okay.
But those are conversations that could happen on site as well. We have some flexibility. I think I mentioned a couple 100 feet. We have some flexibility on where that might go. For instance, the one on the north side of the lake, I've got a range in my environmental study that covers about 150-foot swath. Trying to get it placed where it's not in the way of a property line or a driveway or a garage or trees or something, but it has to fit in that corridor somewhere.
Couldn't it be on the other side of the road where the swamp is?
Could be. It's just a question of wetland disturbance, but it could be. There's potential for that. And I think to look at some of the ones that are around the city, you can kind of see, and that one that I mentioned by the Deep Rock turnaround has a really substantial, way more than you would ever have, a really substantial paved area around it because they had the room in that corner. So don't take that as anything. You'll see the concrete area though that would be indicative.
Should that place be on Bath Lake Road then?
Yes, yeah, into the treatment site, correct. There's.
The officers, I was just wondering, so in case of an emergency, if you're working at one end of Lavinia and it's closed off, are you gonna come to the state park? How are you gonna access if there is an emergency during construction at any time?
Well, we had talked about that, for a number of reasons, medically, met fire, and for, if there's a critical law enforcement need in the area. And we can certainly access that north end of Lavinia off of that area through that, I don't think it was intended to be a parking area, but there's a trailhead there.
Yeah. The turnaround.
turnaround, a couple of spots, we could access that. We also talked about putting resources, at a location on the southern end, down towards more like Teal, Mallard in that area. And then having the resources there be used to get back to, like if we had a medical, we could get the ambulance back there if it wasn't feasible to get them back in a more rapid means. Having a lane open, we could do that with like a side by side and a carry basket on the back of it. Those are worst case scenarios. More often than not, the construction crews are gonna let us through it depending on the circumstances. But if there's we're gonna be well involved with the process of when the shovels hit the dirt, essentially, there'll be weekly meetings that said, hey, we're gonna have a period of time on this day where we're gonna have the road shut down for a couple of hours. And in the event that we need emergency access, this is what our plan is gonna be. And so we'll have that information. You guys might not get that information right away, but the public safety will have all that details worked out on the day on.
And that was before you go, I won't pass over you, but that was part of the situation when we sat down with these folks. Talking about what the best route would be, and what we settled on was ensuring that we have access, especially for the fire, because they have up to 80,000 pound vehicles that need to get through. So we need to have full access there. And then that staging or phasing that we would do to try to avoid, or not avoid, but minimize the need for those extended vehicles and kind of spotting those. And instead just allowing that access continuously, essentially.
Yes, sir.
Just an ask, I guess, as the project gets started, would it be feasible, or could we get more communication, maybe more regular communication as where we are in the project, what's going on, maybe if you got grants, just instead of, like, I think you said we're doing quarterly, or now you set up a website, but if we could get a monthly, or even if it was as the project was going, every couple of weeks or something, just some more communication to all of us to say, hey, here's where we are, here's what we're doing, this is the next phase, and it'd be good to see something.
Absolutely. I think that's a very fair thing to request. I think if the project is going on, when the time when it's really affecting you guys, I would expect that we're gonna do our absolute best to be communicating and having stuff on our websites very regularly, whether it might be almost daily sometimes, even if there's something that's updating that FYI, I think that's just something that would be a great idea to bring up. If we know something's gonna be going on, that might be a couple hours, we can put it on our website. We will try to utilize those things. Luckily, Chris is very technically savvy. He can hopefully help us with a lot of that stuff, with putting these things up for us. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
With all the dewatering and trenching and so forth going on, we're all on the same aquifer for our wells. Is there been a study or anything, any possible impact on our weather?
So we have to deal with that in our EPA environmental, but with our dewatering that's shallow, when we're talking about only dewatering down to 14 or 15 feet, unless you have a shallow well that's not legal right now, you're in a different aquifer well below there. Yep, not just your groundwater. So most wells should be greater than 50 feet. That's one of the questions that'll be on our survey. So if you know you're feeding off of a shallow well for some reason or somehow, that'd be good to know, but that would be highly unsafe for drinking water to have a shallower well than 15 or 20 feet.
I think you had your hands up there. One of each folks first. Go ahead.
If you're gonna run this down the west side of the Lavinia Street, how are we gonna have access during the construction to our homes?
There will be periods where you won't have direct access. There will be through those phases where you would have some distance to traverse there or park on the other side and walk across.
Can you give an idea like how long those generally are?
Yes, so those phases, you might have no access to your property by direct to drive in the driveway, for instance, for a few days, for instance, where you would not be able to during that main construction because you'd have that active trench open and then they'd come back and do that service stub to the property line.
So across the road from me, I got a swamp.
Sure.
I got no way of getting in there.
Right, so there's gonna be,
I got no place to park.
there's gonna be individual, no different than, for instance, if you lived at the T intersection in the city and you couldn't park in the intersection on the other side, no different from that.
I think like what would happen when these things happen as they're going along, when they get into that point, there will be communication between the contractor and between our engineers and stuff. There wouldn't be something where all of a sudden you pull into your drive and be like, oh my God. They tore my
I can't
road.
get out or I can't get in.
There will be stuff that there'll be communication. And we hope that, I think when Mark's saying like, everything we're talking about here today, I think very much so, is a lot of worst case stuff. We're talking about prices, things we don't want to come back and tell you guys something that's different. The stuff that we came with, that's where we're at right now. We're still looking for more things. We're talking about like lengths of times that you could be shut down. Mark hopes, I'm sure, to be done with these things sometimes in less than days and hopefully just hours. But I don't think he wants to mislead anybody because there could be some rare situations where it might be a couple days.
Right, typically, for instance, when contractors are installing sewer, it comes in 14-foot lengths. And they put in a 14-foot length every 15 or 20 minutes. So I mean, they're boogieing along, but you've got backfill and compaction and getting a driving surface back on. So there's some delay there. And then they often come back and do a service after the fact.
You want to offer some perspective?
Yeah, I just had three or four comments. Part of it, and he talked about a bullet on this project and then the informational meeting things. Just want to say that in, there's some state statutory requirements on meetings, and so the board will be having a project hearing that everyone gets invited to. Mail notice, legal notice. That would happen probably this fall, sometime in December-ish. And then I think Mark mentioned the assessment hearing, that date's a little fluid yet, but it could be fall, it could be in the next fall of 5 potentially, so there's some, and each one of those meetings, everyone will be a little bit smarter, there'll be a little more information at each one. But when it comes to that assessment hearing time, that's the one that should have the best case or the most accurate estimate of what that assessment would be. And then in addition to that, probably likely to have regular, there could even be weekly meetings with people. So I just want to mention that, and then I just had three other points I want to make that there are some assessment options for people with financial issues that they could talk directly to Chris to privately at another time. There's some options for that. And then just two other things for Mark on service lines, maybe some clarifications on the details of the portion of their service line that gets built through the project, stubbed onto the right of way and depth and all of that.
Sure.
Second part, there's a question about reliability or if a lift station failed on a holiday or that type of thing, and maybe just a comment on redundancy and pumps on lift stations.
Sure. So regarding the service selection, what we had installed, and there were some earlier questions on that, what we install or what rather we design and the contractor installs is if you envision this pipe working its way down the roadway and then what's called a Y again, which is how your service would connect in. That comes up at a slight angle, works its way off at plumbing slope, so a grade that drains to that pipe out to the right of way, unless there's some instance where you can't get to the right of way. And then there's a clean out that actually comes to the surface. So you may envision a clean out in your house that has a cap on it that can be removed in case you need to do cleaning. So that comes right to the surface there and then is marked. So that is the infrastructure that would be left there. And at the base of that clean out, there's a short stub. Varies from 6 inches to 2 feet, depending on what they have laying around from cutoffs from other pipes. And that's where your plumber would eventually connect in at that location. Does that cover what you were thinking there, Mark?
Yep, just so there's clarity, they don't have to go back and dig up the road.
You're not coming into the roadway. And we did have that question on County 20 was, how do I get there? Because we are gonna have a bike trail and everything. No, that'll be stubbed out to the right of way where you can connect on without disturbing that roadway. Regarding, oh, go ahead.
No, taxes have gone up, so project is all done. I think I don't want to come back and assess again, trades, real estate, it's fast futures. Based on the completion, because now we have to consider.
I can't answer that question. I apologize.
That falls.
No, so bad against it.
Well, we'll answer it. Mike, do you want to answer it first?
But okay, it's like when you get a new road in front of your house, you have a gravel road and then I get it paved. That's not what changes my taxes. What changes my taxes is all the properties up and down my street and in the area that are getting sold. That's the basis for taxation, okay? It's all about our budget. It starts with our budget. If our budget goes up, you're gonna have an increase in your taxes automatically. Our budgets won't go up because of your project. But the other part of this is the valuation of your home. If the valuation of your home if it only was your home, it wouldn't make any difference at all. All right. But throughout the whole area, as all the property values are going up, That is the basis for what your taxes are start at. Your valuation of your property. Second part of that is our budget. If the township budget goes up, the valuation goes up. That's how it works. Directly related to the project, because you either have a mound system or you're hooked up to it, that's not the case. But if your property is worth more money because you now have municipal services, that's gonna change. So I think this gentleman's right when he says, yeah, don't count on it staying the same, because things are going up, nothing is going down.
Regarding,
What's that?
This project as a whole would drive that up, wouldn't it?
Well,
You just said that.
I can offer another, yeah,
Sure. Go.
so I've talked to
It's
the
not a
county.
straight answer.
Yeah, I've talked to the county assessor about this in specific. And he said that they mainly use the home prices, sale prices to set those limits. So it's not like they're gonna go out to your house and see there's a system in their ground and then automatically your prices go up. It's gonna be residual based on what home prices do after the fact. And home prices are always going up. That's why people invest in real estate. So you're gonna continue to see that trend over time. But this specific project shouldn't really affect that, not immediately at least. Yeah.
I think it's gonna be really important that you communicate very regularly, not just at the time of the impact, but all the way along from this day forward
Well,
to all of us.
sure.
In a newsletter, online, whatever, but make sure, because some of us leave in September, October, whatever.
Yep.
We don't know what the heck's going
So-
on.
I'm gonna tell you this right now too. This is something so you folks know. We have meetings every Tuesday or every Monday, every second and fourth Mondays of every month. We have this device that you can watch them online every month. There's a website to click on that to watch it if you are gone. That is out there. We go through very few meetings without talking about this stuff. So it's always out there. And so,
Just go to see it on the
Of
agenda.
course.
And know what
Yeah.
time it is, because I've looked at your meetings
Yeah.
and couldn't find it.
well,
We just showed up and we kind of made it the last
Sure.
meeting being agenda item.
yeah, so we generally put like utilities, we just read that through right on there. It's part of the, kind of update of utilities. That's what we generally do.
Sewer project.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
significant and it's different than.
Sure. Okay. I mean, we can try to be more clear about where it's at. I mean, about what time, but it's generally something that we do talk about in almost every meeting. I think there's very few that we don't, but I appreciate the feedbacks.
back to the redundancy Mark Borseth had asked about. So for a general example, in these lift stations, of which we're talking about 5 for phase 1, each of those will have 2 pumps that can handle the average daily flow on their own separately. One of them may have 3 pumps, for instance, just depending on our flow characteristics. But there is that redundancy, and we do have a massive amount of volume below any invert of your service connection in both the lift stations and the infrastructure itself, manholes, mains, services. So just like a municipal system, that's where we're looking at. It is a municipal system. We have that volume and that redundancy built in.
Well, I will say one more thing. I was gonna talk about town taxes and stuff like that. I know he's lived this and he's talked about it so many times, and why we are so protective of making sure that we're doing projects like this is because, as you guys are well aware, part of the reason that the taxes have went up so much lately for a lot of us is because of the huge amounts of annexation that's happened to our township. We are trying to stop that, so we don't see those big swaths of northern township property being taken away. Rutgers, whether a person likes it or not, is a huge taxpayer of this township. And so that's why we're looking for dollars and stuff to make sure that they stay part of our township. And that's why we're fortunate to receive those, but we don't want to lose any more of our township, because what that happens is, for example, rural fire is nearly 20% of our budget anymore that was not the case a little while ago. It's a huge dollars of what we spend on some of these fees and stuff anymore. So we want to make sure we keep as much of our township together to keep these costs down as low as possible. That's where this kind of impetus started with this whole thing about starting these conversations to not lose any more of our township. We want to keep it here, and we heard the residents who came to those meetings before that they wanted to stay part of Northern Township too. And I hope folks still feel that way after today. I still hope you feel that you want to be part of Northern Township. I hope nobody wants to say, the heck with you. I guess we're doing our best and that's about what we're trying.
I don't know who I speak for, but I believed it when you said before, we all care about the lake. That's why we're here. We all feel this is a desirable place to live. That's why we're on Lake Bemidji. I'm a bit immune to whether it's Northern Township or Southern Township. It feels like we all care. Part of why we were rated so high, when you look at how they rate cities, it's transparency in government, it's low taxes, all of that factors in. So if we got a grant and Bemidji had 30% capacity, and that's what I've heard, and could take us on, and we already aligned with the fire and the police, is there any way that collectively we could do something like that? Because there's people here who are challenged by taxes. There's people here who've already paid for it once and don't want to pay it again. So I think part of it is just to understand if you've explored all those options, if you'd consider a grandfather, because we've heard about other projects where people actually litigated to get grandfathered in, and they did. And I don't think it should have to come to that for you to consider that if people have already paid, they don't want to pay again already. Not a $2,000 fee, but I'm talking about the 15 to 20,000.
So I guess Chris kind of said this when I was speaking with Chris before and the meeting here today. And, you know, every person has the right to petition the city for annexation at any point in time. That's what a person, we can't stop you guys from doing that. If anybody wants to petition.
Any petition to be grandfathered into a project where it's not your problem. I already have a septic system.
Well, it's not the grandfathering. What you're asking is, can a project go forward of this type, that's servicing a large area? Can a project go forward and the 10 to 20 to 30% that are compliant today, can they just be immune from the project and not be part of the project? Well, the situation is, that I guess that's one way to do it, but that just means your neighbor's gonna pay that much more. But at some point in time, you're gonna need that project. Your property, at some point in time, is gonna need either an upgrade of your system, which would no longer, under law, be available to you do that independently if there's a system there in front of your property. So today you don't pay for it. So somebody else is gonna pay for it to have that pipe run by your house. And at some point in time, 25 years down the road, your property is gonna need that pipe.
I think we're saying if people need it, they should pay for it. And people who've already paid for it, could they wait until they need it? Just like any homeowner would say,
Right.
I'm not gonna go replace my roof if I just put a new roof on. If you come and say, well, you're gonna need a roof. Yes, I will, but it's probably 30, 50 years. That's when I'll pay for it.
I understand why you feel that way, and it's legitimate. It's what you're saying is legitimate, but that isn't the way municipal projects work. Even inside of the city of Bemidji or in Grand Forks, I don't care where you're at. If the pipe goes by your house, you're assessed for that pipe when it goes by your house. You might get a deferral for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that deferral to actually hook up. But you're paying the assessment the minute the pipe goes down. That is the way it's done everywhere, whether it's water and sewer. I'm sorry, that's just the way projects like municipal projects work. But you might have that deferral time extended, maybe it isn't 5 years, but you know, we're trying to do it, we're trying to offer that incentive up front to get people to hook up, to get the system functioning so that you don't have to pay that larger hookup down the road. That's the best I can explain.
You know, like I said, again, I appreciate you guys' comments. I understand the concerns. I mean, like I said, it's not that we're muted, don't understand what you're saying. I mean, we're really trying to do the best we can with it. I get the frustration by some of you folks, and I get some of the comments you've made about looking for a problem. You know, this is not something that's brand new to us. This is something that we've been dealing with since I've been around for 10, 15 years. I mean, Mike's been on this. This isn't new. Like I said, we completely appreciate that this is not all of your problems, but yeah. Go ahead, Louis. I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to say there's been some negatives and there's been some positives. You guys did a great job. Chris, Mike, Mike Kelly.
Don't apologize.
Don't apologize. You guys were great.
Ma'am, you have a point too? Thank you.
There, I know that you mentioned that you didn't want to lose Rutgers tax base. And was there, consideration given to how much revenue is paid for that tax base?
Oh, yes.
As opposed to the cost of the system? How long is it gonna take to collect those taxes paid to the system?
Just in itself, I mean, Rutgers, it's not just. It's not just that. whole thing.
Birchmont Fullerton.
Use, I mean, we looked at this, we looked at hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's actually just a-
So is that a single person? Is this you?
Why we started the project, because we looked at what we needed.
Are these,
That's what we had our first meeting.
okay, the two trustee ones?
Yeah.
Okay,
We saw
so it looks like you have two parcels.
For the last.
Well, no, it doesn't look like, you do have two parcels, and that would be the total benefited footage would be 106.15 plus 50. So it looks like you have about 156 feet, 156 feet
Is higher.
of property, and then it'd be these two added together, 17 plus 8, because you have